你看咱们去的脚步，今面头等接着去的这样把它当背下去，都是这么没把人过为了对过程给把金杯过年长，他先叫声接我接完了吃了，他们觉得投资啊金杯过年就是从完在的说。刚给小众大为门我给咱这边大先这边社会甚至3万多个每个都是叫突进大马过年叫一天上就看这边同白马个被下边的人打了应酬就我见从来被没东北在这边南的人你就这甚至被这样的从那边被满中的到了变错了今年等个基金这边现在经过了刚先如果这边把社会落实跟的你的就各种一些这方面的群可能这边刚讲不了呢被么的跟那个位印度被么高门这边家历史我在东个查瓦节人家们说落实就在为养钱啊个帮不给来做日东讲不了呢真了的公平了呢不被对接着弄到全是讲的我问就Mipham jam bi yang la sorbanda da so lon robi lon na chula jo kangda chuk jo tong gen ji tena de se lon na jo wa kang sada teng da tan bi chu ji cham ban na nyen ban de ban ta dan de che la ye ke dan la dan ne jing ge tawam da da ma ye ke nam je ro wa gun je nam je zam ba tham chi ke de da ge chu ten do se o da tham chi la ta hi de le dan de ane ta Samba Zambo Yempeng Kuni Lang de Tennis and Barisha.
So Tashidale to everyone, greetings to everyone. And then together with that, please listen to the teachings today with the altruistic mind.
Anita Katunga so Mambo do Masata, train someone do good Mambo do se.
And we didn't get through all that much last time. We've got a lot of material to get through today.
Lasso Anita do this sona that Katunga so Anita Tiba Chimbuge, Tene, Casereta, Penando de la Sobagata, the young Tesotamchi, Tene, Trova Nova Yo Mares, Casedi, Tene, Jeba Som de Tapi, Anika said, Ore, then Sanji Ten Papisha, Ore, a Tantan Trugumare, Casedi, then Nova Tangipa with Sanji Ten Papares.
And so to summarize what we talked about last time, we were saying that this philosophy, that is all of these texts and scriptures of the Mahayana tradition, they are without any mistake. And then the reason that was positive for that is because that they are all taught by or posited by the Buddha who has abandoned all faults.
Ane Sanji de Nova maybe Jim Sande, ta some ta jiba, ta ngunji ni yana dictor valata. Tanto di sono già na jiba delle ni ore de cacen ta ngunji ge tene ngonsom dan tene ngonjo da kugjo ge chu de ge tamchi ngonsom chema da jiba chemi go ne tele phapche ni tene ma
And so the reason why then we can establish that the Buddha is without mistakes is because all of these philosophies that he's established were established by valid cognitions. And so there are two objects of valid cognition. And so those are the manifest or obvious phenomena that we can see directly, and those things which we consider hidden phenomena. And so there's two kinds of hidden phenomena, or two kinds of cognitions that can realize hidden phenomena. But anyway, we won't get into that. We'll say that there are two kinds of valid cognitions which recognize these two types of objects, obvious phenomena and hidden phenomena. And the Buddha has validly seen those kinds of phenomena, the direct phenomena and hidden phenomena, by way of those two types of valid cognitions, which are direct cognition and direct valid cognition, inferential valid cognition. And that is the way in which his teachings are established, because he has this validity and his teachings are taught in a valid manner. So we can say that he's valid. He's abandoned all mistakes.
Da this song the mantra no the mano say de care your dang lo ni sam tango da your gang imbala lo te dang timba ji ni so ina mantra ba se manor ba se your yemba ji la lo yemba ji gin zin so na nor ba se.
And when we talk about what is the point at which we could say that a person or a consciousness is mistaken or not? And so when we talk about that, what we need to think about is the object that's being perceived and the mind which is perceiving it. And so if the mind is directly in accordance with what is actually there, what is the actual object, and the mind and object are in harmony, that is, the mind is perceiving precisely what's there, then that mind is undeceptive. That mind is unmistaken. And if the mind is perceiving or seeing something which is not what is actually there in the object, then that mind is mistaken. It is deluded. It is incorrect.
And it then is on the instrument the year the Jane to Yago, your day, and it dang in the running thank you, star. Take that core that so that Jane Yang Day to Yagi, that didn't COVID so that then Yang Day to that, the Tamadu Yatu Madana so petty. That day, that Demba Nisera, couldn't have the Demba, the turn time be Demba said, that Yajag, you're the Deni, the couldn't have the Demba pay Yagi.
Okay.
The turn down they be pay Yagi.
And so now,
Yajag, you're the
so then what we talked about were the two objects of valid cognition. And so we had the what we call the conventional or fictitious reality, and then the ultimate reality. So I'm giving examples here. We'll just say that this car is an example of conventional reality, and the Buddha is an example of the ultimate reality.
That Dundam Tanye Sematang, and the Dundam Jig Semasi, Nig Goni, the Nidi Mantrovama.
And so when we establish a philosophy, it needs to cover the two objects of knowledge, which are the conventional or fictitious level of truth and the ultimate level of truth. And so then to realize or to recognize those two levels of truth, we have the two levels of valid cognition. So we have what we call the valid cognition, which examines or concludes, which establishes, examines, and kind of recognizes the conventional reality, and the valid cognition, which examines and establishes the ultimate reality. And so it's by way of those two levels of valid cognition that we can establish a position or a philosophy in regards with the two objects of knowledge, which are the two levels of truth.
Countries Kennedy, you need to tell about you. Said the gala, then Je, River, Mobosom, and it Teba Drapata. Je Goni, and it Kunzo with treatise of the turn Tonya down. They young Taron tell about the turn them, then it did Pombani turn and Landroa. That cutting Jim Ring over Nixon and Teba Dripa. That the yet they get any take it Nilote, Tong to you.
And so how is it that these two valid cognitions will establish the positions or establish the reality of the two kinds of objects? And so that was through what we went through before, which were the reasonings or the validities of the cause, the result, the essence, and then the fourth, which was the establishing the validity of that whole process. And so those will then establish will see and establish the truth of the conventional or fictitious truth, as well as the ultimate truth. And it's by manner of these four kinds: the causal, resultant, essential, and the validifying or validity reasonings that establish then these two levels of truth. And so if we're talking about this car, for example, and when we want to talk about one level of the car, then we're going to talk about all of the causes, like all the substances and causes that brought about the car.
And They young Tamji Jel Matu, Madu Koran Rangi, Namkan, Ma Sound, Tamji Jel Tungo, Riveted Jel Tungo.
And then the second is that when we see this car, the present car in its resultant state, as a result, we realize that it's not something that just appeared out of space, out of nowhere. It didn't just fall out of the sky, but that it has to rely upon its own causes for it to exist. And that was the reasoning of the result. And so now we have become skilled in the causes and results of this conventional phenomena. And so now once we have established that, then we will not be ignorant about the causes and effects of that. We've seen the truth and we could talk about it.
Then that more depend on some ma candidates in it, that man tatwa matana. And a coca said the kunzo would choose jazzing at the candidates to mean to my hero, and a jaglas about a carina. This some nonata madiva mendor.
And then when we talk about the essence or the nature of the thing, then if we're talking in conventional terms, then we can think about, in terms of the car, we could examine each individual thing. We could think about what is the essential nature of the steel that made the car, the plastic that made the car, and break it down and really find out exactly what each and every one of those substances are.
Okay. That Tanya chewed the digital about the Tanya Moda Kayimati, Mamua Chadi, Kunzo choose it. And
so when we have, we have eliminated any of our ignorance or our lack of understanding of a conventional phenomena, such as this car, then we have now so-called established the nature of the car. We know the car. We know a conventional phenomena. We know the conventional truth of this phenomena.
But daily pen only turning it out by Yemba, that turned on the ripando with jacking Tatoba Tando de Gala, Pansamjela, Mo Moda Koranyang, Manhomache, only Landro. Tiki Jendo, Jetea, Manevando, Divitea, Manevando Yadi, then it Tato, oh, tang over the Tomba, said, then it turned on with the going about the about somebody.
And then when we go even further than that, we go beyond the mere conventional understanding and conventional establishment of the car, and we go into the examination of the ultimate nature of the car. Then at a certain point, we no longer see that thing that we called the nature of the car. We go beyond that. And we see that we no longer see or we no longer observe any car. We no longer observe even a cause of the car, nor a resultant state of a car. And we perceive then the emptiness nature of the car.
Okay, understand? Ta peche tang pe de me ta ripa tang dendeng. Lo do the dendeng in ta dig better touch do that someone tong do that he goya yo mare. Ta ina ya tarong kupa no ni better tam machung it so ina. Then it tepa ripa. Ta delata tepa gonita ma dabure.
And so then, generally speaking, if you have someone who's very logical and extremely intelligent, just by this alone, by these first three, the causal reasoning, the resultant reasoning, and the nature reasoning, they will have already established this, cut through all of their doubts, and become totally certain about the truth of this. But for those who still have some lingering doubts, for those who have seen the reasoning of that, but maybe still have some lingering doubts, then there's the fourth reasoning, which is the reasoning, which is the validity reasoning, or the one that shows the validity of the others. And so that validity is established then by a direct perception and through inference.
Some good make that now not a kid. Luge and Casereta, Shipata Maricola, the thematic. The one somebody, Semasicata Melaba. The Melaba penning, I'm too good. Moda drag can't trapala, drata the moda de race, drag can't but the Melabate. That dig gonita, on some goni, thank you. Oh, the moda didn't read us any, on some good.
And so then with that direct perception, and we're not just talking about mere, so we can have a direct perception, but we can also have what we call a valid direct perception. And so if that you could see something, but be actually not seeing what's actually there, and that would be an invalid direct perception. But when we're talking about valid, so we're talking about a valid validity or valid seeing, then that is in this context, when we're talking about the sense, our sense consciousnesses, we have a valid cognition with our sense consciousnesses, which means they are non-deceptive in terms of their object, which means that what you see is actually there. What you hear is actually what was there. For example, if you hear the sound of a car and then it actually is a car that you heard, then that ear consciousness, which apprehended the sound of the car, was a valid perception, a valid cognition of a hearing consciousness, which apprehended the sound of the car, like that. So that's a way that they are directly, through direct perception, they're established.
Taro make la soba di wangbo taken Thomas Tacope Yigiyanta, Casering also di ta o Casere Moda Imba Hakoyada, daily Tarombe Nua Sobigonita, on some Revalata, Ying on some da, and a rang on some. Tanguni Yams and Yone, the Moda Imba Tangarang Yams Nua, Tato T Gonipa. The name.
And so continuing in that direction of direct perception, then we not only have those sensory direct perceptions, which are perceived through our eyes, ears, nose, tongue, and our tactile sensation of our skin, but we also have a direct perception in our mental, what we call mental cognition, or our direct mental cognition, which knows that that's a car. And then we also have what's called self-awareness or self-cognition, which is the experiential aspect, which directly has this experience of seeing or hearing a car and so forth. So that's another level of this first level, which is called that direct perception or valid direct perception.
And so then
when the Buddha taught, what the Buddha was teaching is he directly perceived things in this way and then explained them in that way and told his teachers, he explained and established the truth of the validity of his own experience and then taught his students and told them to follow in that way.
Gombi mengada jiba teni hini da lam tong. Degi hini lam tong de so la ten jini tato ane ka sere da ngonsum de da namjo ngonsum setting it. Da namjo ngonsum pena da tongni da pena tudra ngonsum tawo re da tongni ngonsum toksen tongni ngonsum tongor jeba la da pe ngaso da di sem jong tani jiba 총액적인 양들이 발 맞춰봐. 아니 주저를 태강은 som도 따지니. 오 든지스제니다. 남저기다 디 직대는 리비기 추에서 든지지는 따인 거고도 하다.
And so then that was all talking about a direct perception or a valid direct perception of conventional phenomena. When we get into the valid direct perception of ultimate truth, and what we're talking about in that perspective then is what we call the yogic direct perception. And so that relies upon the pith instructions of the meditative instructions, these kind of oral pith instructions, meditative instructions, which encompass the practices of shamatha and vipassana, calm abiding and special insight. And so through those practices, then one will have a direct perception of emptiness. They will directly see emptiness. And what that means to directly see emptiness is that there is not a single instant of interruption in the vision, the direct vision of that emptiness by any factor of ordinary mind or mental factors. And so there's a direct experience of that freedom from all conceptual elaborations that we call emptiness. And so that's the way that what we call supramundane phenomena are experienced in this yogic perception.
Jubada travala tani nyambra yabu cup tela tani some chagre mato yang jitab kopsela sem jong tokba badi chendo na yang kacheri some chagi yomare ta some the jisim timbare yungre mato some tadi yung yoma te cheundu hlobada malabi chebot the yores.
And so the Buddha, if one is a Buddha, then one is directly always in an experience of a direct perception of the ultimate reality, direct reality. There is no fluctuations of ordinary mind and mental factors. But if one is a bodhisattva who has attained the first bhumi and onwards, then when they are in their meditative equipoise, like in a meditation session in a meditative equipoise upon the ultimate reality, then in that moment they're having a direct experience and a direct perception, a direct valid cognition of the ultimate reality. But when they arise from that and they're in their subsequent period, their period subsequent to their meditative period, their so-called post-meditation experience, then their experience of the true reality is interrupted by ordinary mind and mental factors still. And so they have an experience which is similar to a direct perception of ultimate reality, but is still interrupted by thoughts and mental factors. So that's the difference between what we call the paths of training and the Buddha, who is on what we call the path of no more learning or no more training.
That tendri goni tele pupade ta same dia ta uni din teba writing teba re then your dia writing teba ta uni di jing di ngon som ta tedab de chag yores.
And so in that manner then we have this establishing of the validity, and in that manner then the mind is valid in terms of its object, which is valid. So there's a valid, this ultimate reality, and a mind which is in accordance with that. So there's this validity, and this is the, the fourth reasoning, which is establishing the validity of that connection between mind and its object.
That did anything Jabber Chepala, and Casere, Tata di Teduk, and the Jibag Sojuni to Tere, the Jispani, Loipa Pani, or the Digiores in the Pajibag going to Tere.
And so that was the section about the validity in terms of direct perception. And then, there are certain objects which are not obvious to us, which are not manifest to our direct experience, and which we refer to as hidden phenomena, which can only be understood inferentially, that we cannot directly perceive.
And then that Jiba de Dubziga low Matoba the Carres, then Tada Dradun Rinzing it lot. The Dradun Rinzing lote, Takun Jazeg, Tapagi Koro, Wong Jungenda water.
And the mind, which is kind of the legs upon which inference works or walks, is what we discussed last time, which is this mind which merges a generalized concept in the mind with a name.
That dela then ta kare ta se deko jimsen rebata. That jimsen karige goni dobre se deka latene that jimsen then that some
And so then when we're talking about an inference, then we have to have a reason that establishes, why something could be true. And so we talked about that reason in terms of 3 ways or 3 modes that must be completed for a reason to be an authentic or actual reason that can prove something.
No chippy Jimsen go the Dovna Tapen and Della, Caton make the Yemba Zui, and it take where Chedela, Saba Zogonadava, that modern the church, Matati Sebishars in the Tapagila.
And so then we can have reasons which are a reason which is
the end of the Dirama make awesome.
And so we have 3 types of reasons. And so there's the reason of the result. And then there's the reason which is the result. There's a reason which is of one nature. And then there's the reason of a non-observation of something not existing in some place or something like that, or because it's not seen in a place. And so if we take an example of a reason of the same nature, we could say this car, the subject of our debate, this car, it follows that it is impermanent because it is a product.
Oh, that driven that gonna. Moda de la chuche meye de taban babishar, taban subishar.
And then we could give a result reason. We could say this car, the subject in this car, it follows that there's fire in this car because there's smoke coming out of the tailpipe. So the result is the reason. The result is that smoke, right? So because we...
So
anywhere that there is smoke, there must be fire. That's the establishment of the proof.
The casere da mame bita ta mantong bita gona tene pagi dunji jedana chuchi moda me de moda chime mami bisata.
Or we could say like an example of a reason of not being observed. We could say in the space in front of me, it follows that there is no car there because there is no valid cognition which sees a car being there.
That's all. And it didn't go in tanga so dumb to the galatanga so some manton be treated so tamtia so that the shade took to us. Manorba, Semasi the Mantroba, so then about took to us.
So even things that we cannot directly perceive, we can still have a valid cognition about them. We can actually have an understanding which is unmistaken and undiluted about them, even though we can't directly perceive them.
And it happened in the Dowaja, young Dido with the Dragona, that Katon being a such a down ten say, Jura, then I get in it, the two times ranging the Penata, Pena Moda Didota, ranging Mother, but take that Timmy ranging the Mamik Sellers. And so taking over to come to Timingo, Mother Sellers, and then say, go to the color. And so we can also establish the ultimate nature by saying, for example, this car, the subject, this car,
it follows that it is not inherently existing in any way, because it is not established as being a singularity, nor is it established as being a multiplicity.
추닉 원선 통마 탑이 강사돼서 탐지 라양다 추닉 때야게 탑대요래 네 송단 장군 뭐하는 무지게 가르송 요르세나 나서 그 돈이라 소식제워제 이나야 돈이라 지바가 저도 지처럼 통거 말레스 가서 가서 네 땡색리 또 비고는 통그래 봐스 근데 송도와
And so then this is the method by which someone who has not had a direct vision or direct experience of the ultimate reality can gain an understanding of the true reality through this inferential process, through the valid cognition gained through inference. And so Mipham Rinpoche says, there's no reason why. He said, why wouldn't someone not be able to infer the true reality? We have all of this reasoning. You can, validly establish and infer what the ultimate reality is.
나서 다 디송다 같이 단 도르디송은 나서 다다 되니 지바 단 헤더블 지바래 발라 다 지바델라 아니다 로 가르기 지스파그래 다 가르기 지스파레선 로차송아 다 드링아서 되니 간데스치니 초 간데스치니 지스파레세두 다 디디니 마히에기 요세르바.
And so to summarize again, like where we arrived to now, we talked about we were in this section talking about that validity, the establishing the validity of our inferential cognition, our inferential ability to understand reality. And so we talked about the mind, which can understand that reality, which is that conceptual mind that merges general concepts and names, and then the reasons and how those reasons work. And now we're going to talk about how the process works, like how you actually infer something with that mind and those reasons. And so now the way that this is going to be established is by talking about it in terms of the three kinds of objects that could be established through inference. From a genuine perspective, this is verse number 36. From a genuine perspective, all appearances are now and always have been the same. And since a pure mind only sees purity, their nature remains entirely pure. Real functioning things dependently arise, and what is unreal is dependently imputed. Therefore, both the real and unreal are empty by their very nature. In the way things are, one cannot separate a thing which is empty from its own emptiness. So appearance and emptiness are indivisibly united. This is inexpressible. One must know it for oneself.
Then that topic is about a temple good tiny bit semata, Mada Tru, Tonwig than yours, Ninja. That's some tradition said. The other Gasset Tanye de Reval,
No.
Tanye de la Tema Ninse, Dondom de la Jaya. That's some the dig going to Namchag.
Okay. And so then this is broken up into three objects to be recognized or to be understood. And so the first is the ultimate reality. That's the first object. The second is the conventional reality, but then there's two types of conventional reality. There's the conventional reality, which are the conventions seen by a purified mind, seeing what it sees as valid but conventional, and the impure or ordinary mind, what it sees as valid and conventional. So the ultimate truth, that's emptiness, right? But the and so there's two objects, right? The conventional and the ultimate, and we need to have two valid cognitions, and a mind which sees each, right?
아니 다디 대송단 다디 제당게디 마다 처럼 통화 레다 당담 다 동이 거기서 다 가정지 해 찾았다 얘기면 다 싫어.
So we already went through the mind that sees the ultimate truth, so I'm not going to get into that again. That was what we were talking about before.
다 마다 처럼 통화돼 다 가서 강통된 데랑래 다 얘기해 주면 도 싫어.
And so of the first of those two conventional valid cognitions, so the one that is the one of the impure ordinary being, that's everything that we see in ourselves. It's nothing to explain about that. It's everything that we see with our ordinary vision.
다 답답해는 상지게 징어들라 아니 나서다 문다바지 지기 오레스.
And so, but when we talk about the things that are seen or the perspective of the Buddha, when the Buddha sees the same things that we see, the Buddha sees something different. He's not seeing what we see.
디 가르세온도다 디 탐치 답이랑인지 통기어로다 상지로 되는 배 운이 찍바 신강게 나와도 배
So the Buddha sees everything that we see as something utterly pure, as what is described in the text as like a pure land or pure realm.
Den 통도 갈라당 빼는 아소그 오다 랍지니 오래다 되잖아 우니 집아 용구도 안다 산지 통에 코나 지마레 데 코나 베지 셈바디 톨라 차주래라고 나소그 삼노다 땅 초그래 세려봐 데 산지 코나 셈바 톨라 땅데 세네지 이나 양 바디 셈바 톨란 롱에 제게 딘다비기 추이 몽보 텔람 바우나 데 가서 덴바레세 라 투고 말해 봐스 라 답이 차다 야나다 산지기 답이 지바 데 산지 주마 차르스 고 셈바 로 도그델 곰자 셈바 톨라 차주레 답바들이 요 말이 쌈 초래 가서 봐
So we could say, the Buddha spent 6 years meditating, just ruining his mind, and now he just sees like nonsense. We could say that, we could say that.
이나 양 뱅아소다 산지기 로 최종 가리마 가수 하고 두두왔어.
But we can see the difference in the vastness of the Buddha's mind and our own mind, can't we?
So I'm
talking about all of these things, all these aspects of reality that the Buddha has seen that we can't see, right?
So it'd be
in that thinking of it that way, it'd be quite difficult for us to think, oh well, the Buddha has just gone crazy and he's totally ruined himself, right?
Yeah.
So we really must present the vision of the Buddha as being a valid cognition, a valid perception of reality. And so just as there are three objects to be perceived, that was the ultimate reality, and then the conventional reality as perceived by a Buddha, and the conventional reality as perceived by ordinary beings, there must be three minds or three levels of mind which perceive those three types of realities or three objects. Okay, we don't actually have time to go into describing each and every word of the text, so let's keep going. And so then when we get into the way that those are established, when we're talking about those objects, that could be our ordinary worldly objects that we perceive as an ordinary being, or the objects perceived by the purified vision of a Buddha, then these next verses talk about the four ways that those objects are established. And so the way then is that any affirmation, this is 39, any affirmation whatsoever it may be must affirm either existence or identity. Any negation whatsoever may be must negate either existence or identity.
That's such a drug gonna die young. And so
if we want to affirm something, we can either just say like, I exist, or we can say, I am this or that, right? So that's an affirmation of existence and identity. And if we want to negate something, then similarly or opposingly, we should say that something doesn't exist or it's not something.
Yana ngala moda mix.
So like we would either say, I don't have a car.
Yana di moda mare sanji de moda mare
Or we could say
the
Buddha is not a car. Right?
This hometown sani meju cheda ke yola yang tegarang maing that di chepareda. Meda mindset.
So that's the difference between. There's a difference between what we call a negation, which is a non-implicative negation, and an implicative negation. So when I say the Buddha is not a car, that's an implicative negation because we're implying that the Buddha exists in the first place. But when we just say the car doesn't exist, that's a non-implicative negation because we're not implying anything in the absence of a car. When we say there is no car. So that's the way that the level. So we use affirmations and negations when we are inferring something. And so then we have these four levels of affirmation and negation, either saying something exists or it is something, it doesn't exist or it's not something. And then the way that those actually apply to an object is described in the next verse. So 40 negations and affirmations based on what is valid may be set out definitively in the proper way, and then while remaining logically consistent, one can prove a point to others or make a refutation. When it comes to refutation, you can compose your own syllogisms, including all three modes. Those are the three modes of the reason that we talked about before. Or you can state the consequences that follow from your opponent's very own assertions.
Dila Casereta, Tepa de Sedogura, Mantepati Kagura, teaching the Druba, the Sinjin Rodicota.
And so when we're talking about here, it says you can prove a point to others or you can make a refutation. And so what that's talking about is we're talking about establishing validity or disproving non-validity. And so if we want to prove validity, then we assert something. We prove a point to someone else with an assertion, or we refute the assertion of someone else's with a negation. So and so if we want to show someone that fire exists in a place, for example, in this car, we would say, wherever there is smoke, there is fire. And there's smoke coming out of this car. Like that, right? So wherever there's smoke, there's fire. There's smoke in this car. So?
Yeah.
And so we could say then also, whatever is a product, whatever was produced by causes and conditions, has to be impermanent. This car was made by someone, right? It's made by causes and conditions, right? Like that. So when you want to prove a point to someone, when you want to make an assertion, that's the way it would go. And then when we want to make a refutation, like when we say a refutation, that means that someone has some idea which is incorrect, and we want to refute that. We want to eliminate that misperception in them.
Maybe
Do a mepatao, maybe Cherson.
Casimendeba Town Hangora. Could Tawayaba kill and quarter what the one de la Chuchin, no Mare Moda de la Tawa Mevatal.
Do a yopa tonsarala.
Or that the Corona Pedding Gavajo Horavata. Tangawaji Kugo made your Marisi Horava.
Oh, it.
Tava Yabaku kill and the Horavata. Teaching the Tava Meva Talsayada. That you did Tava Yabak kill and members.
Okay.
Because it didn't you make kill and to us.
Okay, so like for example, if you had someone who says, no, there's no fire in the car. And you say, and you have to say, so they already have seen that the smoke's there. And so you will give them a refutation, meaning that you're going to basically oppose their wrong view by giving them maybe an absurd consequence of what they're saying. So like, for example, they see that there's smoke there and you would say, okay, then it actually follows that there's no smoke there. That smoke that you see doesn't exist because you're saying there's no fire. But you already accepted the connection between smoke and fire, but you're still insisting that there's no fire.
That's
And so a refutation doesn't have to follow the three modes of the reason that we showed before. It's just that if you can show the fault in what they said by expressing that fault with its consequences, then that becomes a refutation.
Also, anything this sounds like Penandi Dada de Drunga the Sinjing or then the soap and Yenda Jason Zimbabwe, Yenda Jason Zimbala and the Goyer, that the Drunga Goni Pene Chu, take Casere Kare Zone, Kondigi Chu Kare, but it's a drug on the Drunga Goni drug. The name Coson looked up the way in a passeate, Sinjing Goni Seni, and then they looked at our in the day, Rotwetch, or to this check.
And so these two, the way that we engage with this this kind of reasoning then is that when we use these points of proving a point or making refutations, these two processes are said to be methods for bringing people onto the correct path. For example, like showing them the reality through an assertion of a point, or eliminating their wrong views to bring them to the correct understanding of reality.
So that dinima that dig casereta jibageta di yevate so mahi ungdua jibag yevatela teni jibag yevate mahi und koran la yang teni di tanye tsema dan tsema ni yeva ni chini he ungda tambodi na tanye tsema de he ungdola.
Okay, and so then when we get into this further discussion of inference, then we talk about an inference discussing our conventional valid cognitions, and then one dealing with the ultimate valid cognitions, and we start with conventional valid cognitions.
That tanya itsemadela tanya layang ninangta muntu nawa yebisar mada tsuron tongwata tabizipa lateni kunde tanya itsemani mada lai megino Deni Gina Chebrayang, Mowa Jimdi Lady Ye, Nititana Malay law, Rangyor Tsoyin Zone Case, Rangyor Tsoyi Zone Case, Tsuntong Yola Dronduse, Garden Yonson Zambao, Jache Wai Hine, Kitty Chuni, Miglike, Some Chavio Dronduse, Jenin Chimbin, Regeno, and Regeno Sitanaba de Redo.
So 42, within the conventional, there is that which we call the impure and narrow vision because reality and appearances do not coincide, and a vision in which things are purely seen. This makes two types of conventional validity, like seeing with eyes of a human and like seeing with eyes that are human and divine. The difference between the two lies in their essential natures, causes, results, and functions. One is an undeceived cognition of limited scope that arises from correct perception of its object, clearing misperceptions of how things in a narrow field of vision to bring through an apprehension of a given object. One is a pristine cognition. This word, pristine cognition, is a translation of a word that's sometimes translated as primordial wisdom or timeless awareness. So one is a primordial wisdom of what is vast in nature. That arises from an observation of precisely how things are, clearing misperceptions of objects beyond the imagination to bring the result of wisdom that knows all there is.
So that di kala danga so koguya de.
The absolute as well has two aspects, categorized and uncategorized conceptually, and to evaluate them, two types of validity for looking into what is ultimately true.
So that dekabla ani da ko guya de cher nangbala da denye da deni se data yonga chade yore.
And so coming into this point, then two very commonly known about presentations within Buddhism are the presentation of the four truths and the presentation of the two truths.
And
then within presentations of the two truths, we can have the same name, the two truths, but different presentations of the two truths. And there's kind of two different types.
And then
so the Buddha, when the Buddha taught in what we call three times, or what we call the three turnings of the wheel of Dharma. And when the Buddha first taught, he taught from the perspective of, or through the lens of, the Four Noble Truths. And when he taught the second turning of the wheel of Dharma, he taught through the perspective of the two truths. And then he also talked about the two truths in the final turning of the wheel of Dharma. And the presentation of the two truths in the second and third turning of the wheel of Dharma are a little bit different. In the middle turning of the wheel of Dharma, the Buddha taught that, or established that, all appearances are conventional truth and emptiness is the ultimate truth. So in the final turning of the wheel of Dharma, the Buddha established the two truths as, if the reality and the way that it's appearing to an individual are in accordance, if they are the same, then that is the ultimate truth. And if what's reality and what is appearing to you are different, are not in harmony, then that's the conventional truth. I'll give you an example. So, for example, the nature of our mind, the ultimate nature of our mind, is said to be peaceful, pure, and clear, and luminous. And so that's the situation of our mind. That's the way it exists in its reality. And if we see it in that way, if it's appearing to us in that way, if we are actually, our mind is perceiving it in that way, then that is the ultimate truth. And otherwise, if we look at our mind and we see our mind as being, if our mind is appearing to us, or we are seeing it as something bad, something that is attachment, aversion, ignorance, jealousy, pride, anger, and so forth, then that way that we're seeing it, or the way that it's appearing to us, is not in accordance with the way it exists in reality. So that is conventional. And so there are some people who are new to Dharma, or who have these experiences, who, when they look into their mind, they're just amazed that all they see is, negativity.
And then also parallel condition de tudo. Sani de tugu mareva. Naso de tugu ko. Coupe londe ya longo do matoji ko rangi coupe de yapoji de do kopa. De could need certain tungu doda. They don't know red was.
And so, but if we really think about it, if our mind's nature, if the reality of our mind was that negativity, was that was bad, then how could we ever find any peace or relaxation in that? But we do find peace and relaxation in our minds. And that, that relaxation, that natural peace and ease is the nature of our mind. And that is the reality. That is the ultimate truth.
And
that also is given the name, the Buddha nature.
And the same tendrige the nepe de unitani hiva, tapet tendrigeta, ore. Ta tendrigota, and a gomyane top the goni, same de pede uni, tani ranging landona, ticket no a day, tapig no a bache, yaundi, titine, your day young, and the tondam yagota. Lo dang yo nika de tondam yagor ko pen sanji ge zinghang de dabo ta turn ni tong da which there is ni de yag yorda.
And so then through the power of meditation, when you're through the power of your meditation, through your vision of that reality, that ultimate truth or that reality, then your perception becomes purified, and all the things that you see then are a vision of that reality. And so then from that perspective, we consider that when the mind is in that experience of the vision of the true reality, then the reality being the so-called object perceived and the mind which is perceiving are both presented as the ultimate truth.
And this honza your tela mandaba ni yata ani titelam buzig mantrabe lo tela yang ni yagodu sema ni yagodu.
And so because there are these two different objects perceived, the conventional objects and the ultimate objects, or conventional truth and the ultimate truth, then we have two types of valid cognition which can establish those two truths.
And data number check the Bamarta and a period of Yenda Yomari that the Nanjima around and the Yade, did other did Semani Yagdo, Tanya Semani Yade, Taco Nanjima around the Yagdo.
Aledi Tanya Chipolati, Tanda
Ola. Does it semadan, Tanya Semas in Yagdo? Did that does it semadi yading and it
okay. And so this is an uncommon presentation. This is not a presentation you'll find in all of the schools of Tibetan Buddhism. This is a particular presentation of the early translation school of the Nyingma when we talk about the valid cognition of the purified vision of the Buddha and the valid cognition of the ordinary beings.
And tapen Hanjobi Yong that deriva in Jango Mohormuchi than a song to a did take the Garangre, Konganjobi Yong Turnsage, Kavala turn to Sen and Derangre. On then the one is Tankiyore. Then at Semaning to Contana Hekidota, Yola, Matsemaning than a Hekida. Manjoba Heki Yore, Echa Kavani Heko Sena, or the race studying Nima Yong Devante, turn Shira Radan and Hekidwan.
And so this is like a particular presentation of the Nyingma that comes from these texts of Mipham Rinpoche, such as this text, the Sword of Wisdom for ascertaining reality.
Anita di any don't have
no.
Oh, then this home dan dig deni yaun the gala. Nicho the namso timba dela, tundam demba, Nicho the namso. And
so when we present from this perspective the two truths, then the way something is in reality and the way that it appears to you, if those are in accordance, if those are the same, then that's the ultimate truth. And if what exists in reality and what you perceive are different, that's the conventional reality.
And then that tell up in Yenda Lania, Tachi, Nima Bagata, Dini Yagdo, on that Tini Chiba Carres, Lana, then the Namasonda.
And so then if someone were to say, okay, well, then what's the difference between those? You early translation school, Nyingmapa people, what's the difference?
No. The Yagoni, Mowo, Movichipa, Jichipa, Dribuchipa, Zeligunichipa, Jayores.
And so there's four differences given here. So it says that the difference are from the perspective of the causes, the results, the functions, and the essence or the nature.
That teaching cheaper the Taro pay Gonigena may make the fly make Nanjingitini or Jachechonda, Sarmasag Chepayo.
And then there's an example given for the difference of those, which is in terms of the clarity and the extent of the vision of an ordinary human's eye versus the eye of a divine being.
Up in a last age, I said, kill Langorban, so did you only mugging us or mugg count de Mato, Tongio Mare, flag. 먹은 통화 디 강드나 라 코론송 양 디강 가르가른 통고나 대손 통고여래 다 디지용디 제버들이 야.
And so from the perspective of accepting the reality of divine beings or godly beings, then, there's humans and we can see what we can see, we can understand what we can understand. And what we're talking about is from the perspective of a being who can see beyond what we can see. So that's just an example given for the vastness and the clarity of vision.
So
the Buddha sees everything that I can see. But then in addition to that, there's also special things that the Buddha can see that I can't see. Okay? It's like that.
I like this. Okay, that
Okay, and so now first of those four differences, essential natures, causes, results, and functions. That was from the last line of verse 43. We're going to talk first about the difference of the essential nature. So like, for example, when we're talking about the essential natures, me as an ordinary being, I can only see the cup as a cup, like just as it is. And so the Buddha doesn't just see like these limited things, but the Buddha can understand all phenomena. So there's a difference. My eyes can only see like one thing, like this cup, for example, at a time, but the Buddha can see everything. The Buddha knows everything. So then the cause difference. Okay. And so for me, like when it comes to the cause of my valid cognition of the cup, my cause of the valid cognition of the cup is only the combination of my eye itself, my sense organ, my consciousness, and the object of the cup coming together. That brings me, that causes a valid cognition of me seeing the cup. And so the Buddha's, cause of seeing all phenomena is through the power of his meditative absorption into that emptiness, which is the freedom from all conceptual elaborations, direct perception of that, and so that becomes the cause of his, knowing all phenomena. My cause of knowing the cup is my mere sense perception of that. The Buddha's knowing of the cup and all phenomena is from his direct experience of emptiness in his meditative absorption.
Dromduk cheba, dromata, kormata, reba. That ding it semang to that derivata. Taka you the Chetava in toning it, draw tagmarota, Koran dugumarota.
Less.
Draw tire the Koran duguma.
Okay, and so my function.
Draw tachini, then the lady dig no than a petty carinati.
That's
that chimbo dosing and the Tongsom Nagi chimbo, draw tagmara.
Less. And so the result or the dribbery, the chile.
Sema the zili.
Okay.
And that sema in a zili de carrileca. That dromata, covamata, we need in Tongo.
Okay. So the function of my valid perception, my valid cognition, for example, of this cup is just to see it for what it is. And when I see it for what it is, then I won't exaggerate what it is, nor will I deny what it is, because I know what it is.
When Tazik, that's Sanji gets him at the Dovicina. 나서가 파체디 썸데 마차피기디 요 탐질라 디 드롬독디 세로요다. 그래봐. 고가 충청제 때에 세리 산지기다 썸지 마차피기 탐지기 때는 봐. 드롬독 세트고요. 스테이지 거다.
And so like just how we eliminate any kind of misperceptions or overestimations or denials about the reality of the small objects that we see, the Buddha does the same but for everything because he knows the reality of everything.
다 세마긴 리브데 가르레다 다네 나랑 맥도지나 다 거스퍼비 요데다 그래봐 다 만어반징기 데레다.
And so then when we talk about the result of a valid perception, then whatever ordinary object I might be looking at, like for example this cup, then I just know what the cup is. I recognize the cup. That's it. That's the result of my valid perception of the cup.
답변은 산진다고지네 다 진예바 탐지되는 희로고요, 여러분. 리브데 데레다. 진입 취탐지 희.
And the result of the Buddha's valid cognition is to know the reality of all existing things.
다 진입이 취인 천세대 땅가서 가르쳐서 리 오니 섬거다 같은 때를 법송아 된데서 탐지 천세대 라고 요레스.
And when we talk about the Buddha knowing all things that exist, we were talking about before when we talked about the three types of reasonings or the three types of appropriateness. We were talking about knowing the causes of things, knowing the results of things, and knowing things in their essential natures.
And the color ngaso de pangja kari langja kari ta ngaso le chi kanga mthya da ya bo yung ya ge di pangang kari ba den chen se.
And the Buddha also, in addition to just knowing those things, the primary thing that Buddha knows then is what should we be avoiding, what should we be not doing in order that we don't meet with adversity and difficulty, and what should we be doing in order for goodness to come to us, in order for us to make progress or to have wholesome good outcomes.
And the 세마가 나눠서 써봐지요래. 얘네 오늘 저런 거 산지에 당신 제바이나스. Then zambalelem pokasiyoris.
So sometimes when we're debating in the logic classes, in the pramana classes, in the monasteries, we'll say, okay, well, if you say the Buddha is omniscient and the Buddha knows everything, then does the Buddha know how many insects there are in the world?
And dela jujita bilenti javelwa. Ngela simple trangchemba dela gunkong gaya mes. De guba yo mares bu kase ye di ngaso tranga ta guba kaya mentu se ngaso dela.
Sanje di sungre di lendi chuba di lendi
chuba di chujita wa. Chema namre no sanga.
Okay. Oh yeah.
Chema na nge je simple trangchemba dela kase ta no so de lang da doja deja na tab de ji ba ren je ba. 탐진 쳔바 닝데 제스 탐치링제 마이노스 나서 랑도 그 차디 히비 짐성이 탐진 쳔바 로고에 마도 뭐 참아 여는 가서 그 내가 참 열에서는 그바야 메스.
And so Dharmakirti, who is the composer of the text called the Commentary on Valid Cognition, the Pramanavartika, Dharmakirti says, it is from the perspective of knowing exactly what one should adopt and what should one reject that we refer to the Buddha as the omniscient one, not by knowing precisely what everything is, because there's no reason to know how many grains of sand there are in the world. There's no point in knowing that.
This is like ngaso 탐진 쳔바 세데 데 로고도 코. 짐디 ngô ni so langdo de chi ba de gare chi nga so gare ya bo de gu de gare du ja pang gu de chen bi na ane nga so tham chen chen ba se lo yin se.
So when we say that the Buddha knows all there is to know, that means that the Buddha knows the causes of things, the results, how they are results that rely upon their causes, the essential natures of things, and then in reliance upon that knowledge, what we should be doing in order to avoid negativity and to what we should be avoiding in order to not get into problems, or what we should be establishing in order to develop wholesomeness and goodness. And that's the perspective that we say the Buddha knows everything.
다디 내게 책에서다 시단데 로토고면도 다세 아니 내게 마히에 야야니 지나마데나 제이다더니 데토나데서 갈리 책을마 저추르바스.
So I haven't been able to go through each and every word as I'm explaining this, going back to the root text. I'm just explaining around it. So you're going to have to take this explanation, go back, look back at the text and try and figure out, where these apply.
아니 녜제셰 께ጆ제 조르데 뜻이니다나 사도도나라.
And it takes double the time, because I say something and then the translator needs to take equal amount of time to say what I just said again, right?
라서다 같이 덤덤 답이 지발라 때문에 군도 타니비 체마당 마다 처러는 통이기 때문에 네 근데 타니비 체만이 되라 체바요레 가르체바요레 ngobo고니 체바요레 지고니 체바요레 젤리지고니 체바요레 리브고니 체바요레 다 체바메바 가르레다 다 체바 노아스.
And so then when we're talking about these two levels of understanding, which is the conventional understanding of the world from the perspective of the pure vision of a Buddha or the purified valid cognition, or the understanding of conventional reality by way of the impure ordinary perception. And so those are distinguished by way of their essential natures, their causes, results, and functions. And so there are all of these differences. There was a Campbell gave never mind, it doesn't matter. Those are the differences. And so if you deny that there's a difference between those two types of reality, then we've given all these differences. So if you still say there's no difference, then there's no way to say there's a difference between anything that exists.
Anything is one.
Everything is one.
Everyone is one.
Everyone is one.
아니 다 제당게 배딘 도 파보치 나가서 다 장교 용수 줘봐 너한테 장보지 물론 그 잡고 뒤노노라 산지 그 가르송에서 산지랑 시하는 드르직 땡데 드르니 산지나 산지 시지비는 주바다 대대 취지에는 말이 바탕지 자와다 가면서 드르게 드르직 땡데 드르니 그 산지 주바다 내양 여바 송요레스.
And so in the aspiration for pure conduct, which comes from the Avatamsaka Sutra, then within that, it says that upon one single speck of dust, there are Buddhas equal in number to all specks of dust that exist in the entire universe. So
and that's
so some people think, the Buddha is having some kind of delusion. He's like seeing visions with his eyes, some deluded visions,
That tended to be somebody in a young, then it kache penaso dembaya, Sanji Zumayana, Dayton Digre, in a young, Mandriguating Asuge, Tong Doasi.
And so we can think that we can think we're right and the Buddha's wrong, but we can see many places where we're wrong and the Buddha is explaining things appropriately, right?
And the Pula Naso Digit Mala setting and the code Nankano said the Co Yagracho on the Yanzini Koinima did the legend Yagracho the chair Masomala Tonamason did the legend.
So also in Tibet we have this Lama named Milarepa who, when it started hailing, and he went inside of a yak's horn, and the horn didn't get bigger and he didn't get smaller, and he went into the horn and started singing a song, didn't he?
And
if we were able to have that level of pure vision, then there are a great many beings who can pass unobstructedly through this wall.
Yeah, and that is what I'm Takpi zinang de kora takpi zinang korong la tsema ya na tsema ji doga dana. Then te yoba de tegara ya tanye ge ngaso tsema de je ya de jine tsema ni charu yos.
And so then we give that level of pure vision its own category of valid cognition, and then our ordinary understanding of the conventional reality as its level of valid cognition. So there's two.
And so
now there's a summary of these points.
Oh, that the that don't do de la car segedosena. Tandam lion. There are she do. Oh, you do. She don't be there is a name in the Dana. And Egypt drove that in Dosa, Egypt don't do Sada. Ale, Ale, that did on them some of the ladies.
Oh, we're
still
now we're done with the conventional the two kinds of conventional valid cognition, that from the purified vision and that from ordinary vision, and now we're into the ultimate vision or the ultimate truth, absolute truth. The absolute as well has its two aspects. This is 46, categorized and uncategorized conceptually. And then to evaluate them, two types of validity for looking at what is ultimately true.
So because
there are as well two kinds of ultimate truth, then we establish two kinds of valid cognitions or valid minds in relation to those two. So this is in accordance with the way of talking about the two truths from the middle turning of the wheel of the Dharma. For example, when we talk about the categorized ultimate truth, so I was showing you this potted plant the other day, right? And so when we go through like this object and we conceptually, we remove all the different pieces and we see that there's nothing there. There's no object that we thought was there to find, but still conventionally, it's still appearing there, right? And so that's the categorizable ultimate truth is when we say, ultimately, it does not exist. Conventionally, it exists. That's the conventional ultimate truth or categorizable ultimate truth. Categorizable, categorized. So it follows that it exists conventionally because we see it directly. And it follows that it does not exist ultimately because it's not established as being a singularity, nor is it established as being a plurality or a multiplicity. And so if we cannot establish anything as singular, then there's no way of establishing multiplicity because there's no singular things that could ever establish a multiplicity. You have to have single things to talk about plural things. If there are no singulars that form the basis of a plurality, there can be no such thing as a plurality.
And so
Mipham Rinpoche has a large explanation about this. He says that, in the beginning, beings have so much grasping towards the reality of things that they believe they truly exist. And so first you need to establish the fact that they don't truly exist, that they don't exist in reality.
And this one that number with the down council tapache come singsan with the me singing that in Rogas or Chagri, that matter me singing that part that Tatuk Rogis or Chagri.
And so when you are in this period of working with the categorized ultimate truth, you have something to hold on to. You hold on to this doesn't exist, this non-existence or this non-establishment. So you're holding on to that. You're grasping at that idea.
That's some no matanating dingers or the Jure.
If you don't think about that much, that seems appropriate.
And then some of the town may say they are Tambo, you are passing it on in men and may passing it can young good. That's the young Yomande.
And if you go deeper, if you think about it more, then if it doesn't exist, like how can you hold on to non-existence if existence doesn't even exist? Non-existence is only posited in relation to existence. So there's nothing to actually hold on to.
Like for
example, if there was no such thing as a frog in this world, how could you posit the non-existence of frogs?
So they only
exist Like you can only even assert them in relation to their opposite or in relation to something else. They don't exist in and of themselves at all.
And then sit down the color,
So when you go further, whether you try and say something exists or doesn't exist, neither of them are appropriate.
No, ko ta tamche the drala, kondigi chu de so tamche, ko koala, nyangdi, tendis chin, then kondigi chu de so trading, ta jing mulayam matapachi. And
so when you go deeper and you find that nothing exists as this or that, as existent or non-existent, as samsara or nirvana, and everything is beyond any of those extremes, beyond any of those things that you could posit, that's called the uncategorized ultimate truth.
It's
like Pater Rinpoche says. He says, when you look into it with your logic, it seems as though nothing exists. When the needle touches your finger, it's as if everything exists.
And so
because there are these two kinds of ultimate truth, the categorized and uncategorized, then there are two kinds of valid cognition which recognize those two kinds of ultimate truth. So now here's a summary of what's been being talked about. It is by relying upon the former that one reaches the latter, like impaired vision that is healed and made pure. When the eye of valid cognition is fully developed, the truth of purity and equalness can be seen.
And niba dini kota pene tapi zipala soba tendesche reba tondom de la tambo namrang bitondam chi ne namrang mai bitondam teso tanji tsma lan jogure.
And so when it's saying it's by relying upon the former that one reaches the latter, that's talking about the two levels of our understanding of the conventional phenomena. That is our ordinary level of being an ordinary being and that valid cognition of our ordinary reality. Then from the conventional perspective of a pure perception of valid cognition from the perspective of a purified vision of conventional reality. So they're moving from one to the next, then into the ultimate truth, the categorized understanding of ultimate truth, then into the uncategorized understanding of ultimate truth.
And it tend to jeba ina, and it make you talk with soykin. That make you mebag kang, Tomanagini, Timmy make nam jang te, that same unitary milibi make take and it takachimbo, the Yambachimito and Tongres.
And so then it's given the example, just like impaired vision that has been healed and made pure. When the eye of valid cognition is fully developed, when that's fully purified and fully developed, then that valid cognition reaches its ultimate level of purity. Then it says, then the truth of great purity and great equality can be seen.
Say that the such don't not Tanya Lamo, Taka say town jet in the Tapan Tondu and it Tapachimbo.
And so when it's talking using these words, the truth of purity, sometimes called great purity and great equality, these are, terminology coming from Vajrayana, but basically it just means that everything is seen as pure.
And in Yamba Chimbo said, Tada, Nisan Nang David, Nichugan, Namba de Tamji Tsama, Ngovo Tato, only Giglatani. And
then when it's called equalness or the great equality, what it means is that right now, everything that we see in dualistic terms of subject and object is all seen as equal in that one space of emptiness.
That didn't want Tonga Muni, Tanigata D, the Sotamji Tama Gohudoa, they cast a report. The Yaduda Castle Pena de Ripa Aripa Yesage loves one la Ripa Yellow so but so tamki Tanguni you look the Yahoo Jenny Mata Chugnilo make the patana and it didn't Tongre Tapan Tongre Yaman Tongre Simato go Jimebag Tapachimon Tongomare Yambachimon Tongo Mare.
And so in order to see that great purity and great equality, then one needs to have the aforementioned, stages, like these 4 kinds of validity, or the 4 kinds of, valid understandings, and all of these different levels of perception of reality. And those are the causes which bring about that experience or that vision of purity and equality. And it's not something that comes about causelessly. So now we have actually explained the real, essential kind of root of this text, like the main points of this text. And so that was the main points. And now from here on, those are all the main points of the text. And now of what makes a valid cognition, invalid cognition, and so forth. And now what Mipham Rinpoche presents from here is, clearing up various doubts or oppositions that people might have to that perspective or that presentation.
So yeah, that deal that the that's about condition independent that I super take a janda which is that did about the local Chetang get the young Zeda Coso about in your that didn't Chetang about it.
And so now there's some general kind of arguments or disagreements about those points, and then some really particular ones. So it starts off with some general ones.
That Chetang de la that the Carcere di Messipa, and that the Messipa. Mother Pala Maguvit some doa. That Ambodino Musipa did it. Then there was the Sigma in the Sabatabis on the.
So there's 3 kinds of debates. There's like someone saying that's not possible, that doesn't exist, and then another one saying there's no point in saying such things. So the first one is someone saying that's not possible.
Musipa said the party the same jiglet and trauma said that the Sigma and that Sunday.
So the first is maybe there's no way that you can present a kind of diluted and non-diluted state of mind. So the answer here. So it says the answer here given is it's because the mind, both with concepts and without, is sometimes diluted, as when perceiving 2 moons, like double vision, dreaming or believing a rope is a snake, and sometimes dreaming or believing a rope is a snake, and sometimes not, that we have the categories of valid and invalid cognition. Without these categories of valid and invalid cognition, a clear separation between the diluted and false and the undiluted and true would be impossible, and the tenets of philosophy could not be put forward. And so the answer in brief then is that if you don't say there is such a thing as a valid cognition as opposed to an invalid cognition, then there's no way that you could ever posit any kind of philosophy, and there's no way you could ever also present anything as being true as opposed to something else being false. So next is the refutation of the objection that something doesn't exist.
And so
the refutation is like, none of this exists in reality, like everything's empty. So what's the point of even talking about this, basically?
Then Nanda Tombana, Reme Chukun Lanipi, Tata Tabjo Ningles, Tika Chihu Dramanus.
So when we investigate on the level of reality, this is verse 50, in spite of all these conceptual elaborations based on classifications such as direct perception, inference, valid and invalid cognition, and so on, all is empty by its very nature. And this natural simplicity itself, the word natural simplicity here is saying freedom from constructs, freedom from elaborations. So it says, and this freedom from conventional constructs itself is a feature of all conventional constructs. So conventional constructs are free from conceptual constructs, is what it's saying. Just as heat is a property of fire, so it is that that appearance and emptiness are inseparable in all phenomena as method and its outcome, which is why you cannot negate one and affirm the other without investigating what is and is not valid. But through mundane perception alone, can one enter the ultimate, you may ask? it is true that this is not ruled out. Seeing how a thing is produced from that thing is the direct perception of ordinary people based on which they infer and make predictions. In fact, that is pramana in all but name.
아니 디스기도 데데 가세레 베나 가세레 군접다 돈담니 도와스 라바 탑다 탑조니 도와스.
So basically they're saying that there's no such thing as conventional and ultimate because everything's empty. And he's saying, no, there is. This is proving here that there is a conventional and ultimate, and that there is two truths, you know? And next is that there's no point in this. The next objection is that there's no point.
That's what Google might say. Sema Timing Matiba, Jiktan Tonga Zamki get Dundamnilan Jokinas. Tetra Kakma Memedian Dilin the Jong Tona, Jiktan by Onsomla, Teten, Dumbu Jibatser, Mingma Taja Dermabones.
Sorry, I went through too many verses. 53 and 54 are the objection, or the person is objecting that there's no point in presenting a valid and invalid cognition. And the response from Mipham Rinpoche is, without investigating what is and is not valid, but with through mundane perception alone, can one enter into the ultimate? You might ask. It is true that this is not ruled out, that that's not impossible. But seeing how a thing is produced from that thing, how one thing is produced from another, is the direct perception of ordinary people, based on which they infer and make predictions. In fact, this is pramana in all but name.
That deep so Karisita, this is what also gom job then they cast it in digger basket. Ratati turn a cast in so and deal with top doors. Carson did some goodness and here they
So the main point is that wouldn't it just be sufficient to meditate? What's the point of talking about this valid and invalid cognition stuff?
That Mahayana didn't digress in a youngs. Then the Sema Semi Nila, who do the chair, Sema Semi said, Namya the chair, Maritina, turned out Nietzsche the Hiores. Tinda Vikaza take a young. Turned out Nietzsche the Hiores, and Ala Sema Semilan wrote the Hiore in a main matabsam race.
And so, you know, Mipham Rinpoche is saying, yeah, that's fine, but whether you want to make a presentation of that or not, you're still engaged in that. It's still happening for you. Like valid and invalid perception is still happening.
And so
even if you say, I don't need to talk about this valid cognition, if you see something directly, if you have a direct perception of something in your meditation, you're having a direct valid cognition, whether you want to talk about valid cognition or not. So in an ordinary perception of objects, you have a valid cognition of seeing things directly. In an ultimate reality, like in your meditation, you have a direct valid cognition of ultimate reality. It's still a valid cognition. It's there. So whether you give it the name or not, in reality, that's what's happening. And then it says, without the two types of valid, conventional valid cognition, pure visions would seem false, or even for the impure, it would be infeasible to say that a conch shell, white is its true color and yellow is not. And also it's saying then in the second, in the 54, that it says that, you know, even if you don't talk about the inference, you still infer things.
Sema Timi Mugusenaya, some go the Jiban and Rotido, Tago Maimata Mato, Tigaran.
And so even if you say that you don't need to talk about this discussion of valid and invalid perception or cognition, it's still happening for you. You're still using it all the time in terms of your direct perceptions and your inferences, which are based in obvious or manifest experiences through direct perceptions.
So. Da dinima da ngapjinganga chadu dola zepung ale da zeda da padi di zeda le zoba teri dola da zeda le zoba de tanye le zonge ji da dondom le ji zoba di yin gu do.
So now we're into particular objections, which are one about the conventional and one about the ultimate.
Did you yana mato? Tadi This subject is a lot of that.
I keep losing my point in my outline over here that I've got.
Let's see.
You can't see, but Kempo has some pages of handwritten notes for the teaching prepared.
Tanye chema nimena tapi zikpa zunjo heis. Tanye le zeba de dala. Madan tongwi dongla yangs kaset denzu mteto.
So the first is the argument about the conventional truth. So it says here, without the two kinds of conventional valid cognition, pure visions would seem false. And even for the impure, it would be infeasible to say of a conch shell, white is its true color and yellow is not.
That they say that Tanye ke rangre de la chimani gudon kare resena. Then Tanye ni mena sanji zikwa de zumba de shura no imbes.
And so if you don't present the two types of valid cognition of the conventional, then are you saying then that the Buddha's vision is false? So, or are you saying that our vision is true and the Buddha's pure vision is false? Or are you saying that the Buddha's pure vision is true and everything we see is utterly false? If you don't present the two, that's what you're saying.
And
so then maybe you might say, well, also, there's also no point. I don't need this twofold division of the ultimate truth. And so the answer to that objection in 56 is that without the two approaches to ultimate analysis, we would not know the unity of the two truths. The ultimate would fall into conceptual extremes and would be a cause for its own destruction.
That dela, the Tondam Sematic Matumena Namdang with Sema de Kiku, Yanas, Reva, Kanita. So basically what
they're saying is that if you say that we don't need these two types of valid cognition, which would recognize the two types of ultimate truth, and you say we only need the categorized ultimate truth, then in terms of the categorized ultimate truth, if you say that's the only one, then you can't say that things are beyond all conceptual extremes, nor can you say that everything is a great equality. And if you say that that is the case, then I would say, well, it follows from your arguments that there's no way that you could prove that categorized ultimate truth is beyond conceptual aberrations. There's no valid proof for that. So now there's a summary.
Tada di dondong gudi tento swala.
Oh, really?
Dinen jadze lota rangre jangs.
Really?
Kena madap chedandra.
Ah.
Ini terare swa.
Oh.
Ale ori yaju dine ori yaja kunzab madap chen o dere do ori. Yaja kunzab madap chen jadze lota rangre jang kena madap chedandra. Tatok demba yamepe denjik nyange. Okay,
so 57. The relative, that which is examined, is not real. So too the probing mind and self-awareness. When we look, they are not there, like the moon and water. This is the ultimate indivisibility of the two truths. This is the one truth, nirvana, the limit of reality. It is the ultimate state of all phenomena, enlightened being, wherein knowing and known are inseparable, pure wisdom experience without limit or center.
So it's
being said is that ultimately, like finally, in the final analysis, there's only one truth.
Penatati nanki choje la soba kase da nanki chodok la soba ta chodun ra ore chodun nanki chokdun rare di papu ne pa dun chadu rbal
bas
nanki chokdun de so thato rare len du re salap so khato Ravata Nam Hitsu, there's a Samagama, the Dooms at the Rangrate,
Okay.
Rangrate, they are Kedo de Gala Kumada Chadu Yorba. The Jun de Gala Tanya Samate, Tanki Samaki on the Galapa, Madame Rudugabla. Then a time chita, Nichutis or Ninanga, Namatis of Tajitama, then you make a long jig to Lama. Rogres. They Jun the Tatoga, then it chew data, then you may Nabachim all Rogres.
And so what's being said here is that the mind itself. So we talked about how all levels of mind, whether we're talking about, when we talk about 6 levels of consciousness, 7 or 8. So when we have 8 and you pull out the self-awareness, then all other levels of consciousness are gathered within or are gathered within or are contained within self-awareness. And when we examine that self-awareness further, we find that is no longer, established in any way. And so all of these things that we ordinarily, are established by a conventional relative phenomena, when we examine them in the ultimate level of reality, all of these dualistic phenomena, things that exist as separate subjects and objects, are all dissolve, all merge into emptiness in that indivisible, non-dual space, ultimately. In that non-dual space of great equality.
Oh, Kassereng, the Jaja Yola Samotang Sonayan, then Tato, the Kasser Tamchi, the knee, Nimel and Royati Mato, Takanongil Yat, Yomares. The Yamato, the Lo de Yanta, Kasser, Takanongil Yalo to Yomarda. They tuned the Yoda Yuchi Nika, the tone, Taki, then Yamato, the Tata Travichuni Dana. Then Drogo Yodes.
And so when we talk about the objects which we are examining, ultimately speaking, all of those objects which are, when we examine them and go deeper, they are, they are all empty. They are all this nature of emptiness in this non-dual space. And similarly, if those objects are found to be emptiness, the minds as well, the subjective mind, which would view those objects are equally emptiness. They are equally empty. And so the objects themselves are beyond any conceptual extreme. They cannot be said to be this or that, existing, non-existing, and so forth. The mind which examines or understands those objects as well cannot be said to be in any extreme or any said to be this or that, existent, non-existent, and so forth. So all of these things are in this non-dual space of equality, which is beyond all elaborations or extremes of being this or that.
That's all. Dan digedang aso tata di cek I jaja ge yorde jaze log kande chini ta cek tan phu yemi ko te so tan do chari ser ba ta ma cek tumti namya da wo chi chena ta tumti namya che dong do se gu mare la do dong do wo yang lo ma zu ge hi dong do wo ta去这用什么事情蛮通呢？东岸他就把你们好些多，在那以前他嘛启动着。And
so now all of this has been presented, all of the main topics, such as the objects to be understood, the minds that understand those objects, the presentations of those. So, when the Buddha said, if you don't understand all phenomena, then you won't come to a conclusion. You will not come to an end of suffering. And so all of those objects to be understood that the Buddha refers to as all objects to be known have already been presented now.
That's all. 아니 다 드니 다 가서 데이터를 채마 채민 게다 더한테서 약보 희비 되니 제리세 마다 되게 구반다고 다 제리 되게 내가 가르쳐서도 되니 덤바예 고말로 봐 제데 다데 라그레스다 나서봐 덤바예 고말로 봐
And so the next part is talking about when you know the whole meaning of all of this presentation of valid and invalid in terms of valid consciousnesses, validity and non-validity in terms of proofs and so forth, then what's the point of all of that? What is the function of that knowledge? So the function of that is that you will have a correct understanding of the 4 reliances. So the four reliances. And so those four reliances are: don't rely upon the person, but rely upon their teaching. Rely upon the Dharma. Don't rely upon the words of that Dharma, rely upon the meaning of that Dharma. Don't rely upon the tentative or the provisional meaning of that Dharma, rely upon the ultimate meaning of that Dharma. Don't rely upon ordinary consciousness, rely upon primordial wisdom.
So okay, so
I'm not going to explain that because that's what's explained in these next verses. So what's meant by rely upon? And so for me, as a person who is wanting to practice the path, in order to practice that path, which is more appropriate for me to put my trust in?
Okay,
so that's a general presentation. So we're going to have a general presentation first here. The lam denken ser wala ale kon le chik di signal to di jurla so now 59. Once the excellent eye of discriminating wisdom has opened to the profound and vast like this, one sees the noble path traveled by the bliss-gone Buddhas and their heirs, those enlightened beings of mighty intelligence. This is the way of the sutra and mantra vehicles, so difficult to find. When we have the opportunity, let's not fail to gain the result. Possessing in this way the four reasonings, the four reliances, and endowed with the light of intelligence, let us not be deceived by others, but investigate and be sure to follow the four reliances. If we do not have this understanding, then like a man, it's not leaning on his staff. It's like a blind man following a guide. It's not leaning on his staff. It's like following a person who's guiding him. We rely upon fame. It's not just me explaining that. That's a mistranslation in the text. We can rely on fame, mere words, or what's easy to understand, and go against the logic of the four reliances. And so we need to have the discriminating intelligence in order to be able to not mistake and to rely upon these four factors.
Traffic jindang se on the da kasi de la be ke da chimo kawa se yo na o da te da wo chini ke da ji la pa ju ya son da wo ani che som lang go kho jin da wo da ta ba te ni di ka se de ke da da de che tuk la ba se on the da pe na chang de de so tuk le la ba de ba te ni nge de de so tuk ma tha ba da ten de sin da le la wo da da ten de sin da. And
so like it's saying then, and this last two lines here, we can rely on fame, mere words, or that what's easy to understand. So, with fame, like we might just go after whatever teaching everyone else is going after, whatever seems the most popular. Mere words, whatever sounds nice, or whatever's the easiest to understand. So we just stick only with conventional or with provisional teachings and never go after the real certain or the real ultimate teachings because they're too difficult. If we don't know the four reliances, then we can fall into that mistake.
So,
So now we're into the particular understandings or the particular explanations of those four reliances.
Tene kanza tala na meten chula tanzate. Yangda rikpi tripi lam mipa tito mipo means. Kang lipa mipa na mipo chiki tarjang rongs. Dehe nijan ndrange shempa susa truba yings. Kate tichen tan suli ngawa tana mawapo tanang zanya mahente duty tripi sanji ying.
So the first is not to rely on the individual, but to rely upon the Dharma. And so the first verse, 63, reads, "Therefore, do not rely on individuals, but rely upon the Dharma. Freedom comes from the genuine path that's taught, not from the one who teaches it. When the teachings are well presented, it does not matter what the speakers like. Even the bliss-gone Buddhas themselves appear as butchers and such to train disciples. If he contradicts the Mahayana and so on, then however eloquent a speaker may seem, he will bring you no real benefit, like a demon assuming a Buddha's form."
That things on Jatanga that the days called Yanka Chambores Rala, and the Tamchi de Google Tamchin Chabanon Rogravata, and a Pagin on the Jing Rong, the Tapagini Keda Chambotic Tongrava, Zupoda, Keda Chamboda, that the Digic Tone, the old Tatere, somebody Mato, Digi Chu de Kandi Yiminte, Hamogota, remember the things on.
So there's a lot of danger in this, what's being presented here these days, because a lot of people, they just rely upon the all-knowing Google and they search about Dharma things and they see some famous teacher who's sitting on a really impressive looking throne and they just think, oh, that's the one. And they don't actually examine what they taught. They don't examine the words in the Dharma that they teach.
And then Nambala Shumenda, which you know, you don't get against it, Ya zipu da wuji ki main baya ma to tapja ji phagile yana ji main ya mngila be ma phechin.
And so if someone's, getting into Buddhism, someone new in Buddhism, and someone asks you who your teacher is, then it's as if you want to say some famous person's name and they don't dare to say some simple lama's name or something like that.
Che digi loma mareve da wuji selan oh me di ne chu da hye nyong ara ji ji da re singen da chi.
La.
Are ne kosa chu da ta ka ji lama ina ya ta. Be me chu de su se lama ina ya. Oh chuno de mareve sen ji lama mareve sen re ko nga san ji hye di nyong ina de mare singen da bu de ba.
And so some have to explain around the situation. Like someone might say, well, aren't you this one lama's name who's not so famous? And I'm like, yeah, well, I've heard some teachings from him, but not really. You try and act like it's not your teacher because they're not famous enough or not impressive enough.
And that kashi junior ko laman ji nyong mare chu shen nyong che ka che mare den tombo che yam be ji ni che sei da wi mangen da wi.
And then some who have never actually received any teaching and don't have any connection with some teachers will say that they're the student of this and that famous teacher,
And che di ko ni chu gar thap song sen na. I don't know.
And then if you ask them, well, what teachings did you receive from that lama? They'd be like, oh, I don't know. No.
That de ji ta. And
so these days, it's very popular for people not to rely upon the Dharma, but to rely upon the individual.
That's hema jangeji ina, that's hema de hingeji ina. That kanzala mate chu de la tango ta. That ko kanza zero ma zero chu zipoji tona, de korong ready oresta.
And so someone who has understood these teachings of validity that we've been talking about here, that person is not going to rely upon the individual, but is going to rely upon the Dharma, because whether the individual is very impressive or not, if the Dharma they're speaking is impressive and majestic, that's it. That's what we want. So if whoever that is teaching this Dharma, which is the unmistaken teachings of the Buddha, that's it. That's what we're going for.
And so
that realization that we're seeking, that what we were talking about when we talked about the direct valid cognition of yogic perception, that is the ultimate level of realization. And if they have that, that is Buddhahood. They have Buddhahood. A Buddha doesn't have to be, some being with like these circular features and like you see in the pictures of a Buddha,
that Toba de Yotsana Tenita, Ko Poina, Pomoina, Pajuina, Languina, the Gatsere, go Marekarina, go Chibachimendoasta.
And so if they have that realization, it doesn't matter if they're a man, a woman, a cow, an ox, what race they are, what class they're from, doesn't matter.
Ox, choose here on the rest.
If an ox has that realization and makes that moo, then that's it. They just taught the Dharma.
That's all. Yeah. Then that should say them
So now we're on to don't rely upon words, but rely upon the meaning.
Chula to some Zebana, Sailamater, Aleore, that Dela Tadache, Yore, that Tobachi, and they hear Yagosra. And that Yagi did not go to Nakar here, said, oh, Chu Manaba in the Sanji Sumbi Saras Energy, Sanji, the Zondo Zonga Soma. Yan Dana Kanzal Telomari said, Gavazon Tonkuduas.
And so here's one doubt that might come up that I need to clear up. And so at the very top, it said that these teachings are unmistaken because they were taught by the Buddha. And now it's telling you not to rely upon an individual, right?
Tomba Tema imba tambo chu Tema imba degiti, Tomba Tema drug, and a dig song be chewed whoever, teaching in Gagumare estini.
Karichu Tema Drubni, Gamsa Tema Drubu.
Tambo di Casari chew de Tomba Tema dreva. Tomba de Mandarba inte, done some kettle may be lost. Tambo Bene code Ziba, Tatuba the Demba de Sanjil Dubni, and its Sanji song be said in the pa. The chew manava the pa dubudua. This homes on the young Mare Silvan. Then a chew the Yanda Yimbade, Dubze Sanji Chaswara. Sanji Koran Dubze chew then.
Okay.
Teaching the Indian Gagmares.
And so the reason this is not contradictory is that we had to prove that the Buddha was valid in the first place. We didn't just say that the Dharma is valid because the Buddha taught it, assuming that the Buddha is valid. There is its own proof coming from the Dharma side that the Buddha is valid, that the Buddha's explanations of what's seen directly, what's seen inferentially, what is a hidden phenomena and what is an extremely hidden phenomena are not contradicted by any other factors. And so the Dharma establishes the validity of the Buddha, and then what the Buddha teaches is thereby, established through that prior establishment.
Tensei kudu kalabena tensei rangju dungonga teso ina inchi mini korang dongeng tensei di ku gore mato korang zani machine ji ku suna depend to yo mares.
And so this is getting into too many complications, but generally speaking, when you're talking about an assertive proof in terms of these types of validities or proofs of validity, when you are, proving something to someone else, it has to be something that you actually believe and understand yourself. You can't just teach about things in a valid way without knowing them in the first place.
Da khashila korang de manthong de ko chogre sene ko chogre da. Da pena tada dindobure reba tamba de dubze le yemba ku udo dindo tense yemba ku chogre de ina tense de korang ma hiba de yangja korang lab gore.
Nge go chu mendola.
Da pena reba me yote do yubi ser sigreba. Da ku sambala Dava yona me yeme ha mago ngenchi ina kuide chogre ina yangja hie gorta tela.
Okay. So like
jumse gares de dava de me rang ni chungku mendue sine tense yemba ku undu kala tense tambo de trap rugre. This sin tense tambo de drug ane yeji tense de ngus pagile ka sogre.
And so for example, even though you don't know the Buddha is valid, if I say that the teaching is valid because the Buddha taught it, and you don't know that just because the Buddha taught it is valid, I can give you a further explanation that shows that the Buddha is valid, which then that proof proves that if the Buddha taught it, it's valid. So for example, you don't understand that if there's smoke, there has to be fire, but I can still give you a reasoning that says it follows that there is smoke or there is fire on that mountain pass because there's there's fire there because there's smoke there, even if you don't understand the connection between smoke and fire, because I can subsequently give you another proof that shows that wherever there is smoke, there has to be fire. And when you find out that wherever there's smoke, there has to be fire, now you finally understand that when I told you that there's smoke on the hill, there has to be fire on the hill. And that usually is shown primarily by way of an example. So like for example, if I tried to show him that there is smoke on the mountain pass, or there's fire on the mountain pass because there's smoke, but they don't understand the connection between if there's smoke, there has to be fire, then I bring them to another fire and I show them the smoke coming from the fire, like on a stove or something. And I say, look at this fire, see how there's smoke? Everywhere there's smoke, there has to be fire. And then through seeing that, they know that there is fire on the hill because they saw the smoke there.
There he says, oh, now I understand.
So I think he'd probably say that, you know?
Okay.
Okay, we're going to keep going.
Chula to some Zebana, Chila Mater, said Chila Mater, Chigger Lams, Jada, Jujang Gawame. Don't let the gender Dajer turn je take on na. Session take it driba num, lole lani, Jin Son Song, Cheglan Chena, take to Nampu Maze Padam Paris. Della Cesar in Jerby, Zibarani, Navi Jesse. Hinger he be Chegla, Yosu Chena Seba me. Detam Jijang take on dry guba, Detam says. Zumo Dava Tembana, Zipin Zumo Nila ta. Whenever, it says 66, whenever you study or contemplate the Dharma, rely not upon the words, but on their meaning. If the point is understood, it matters little how eloquently or not the words were spoken. Once you've understood what the speaker intended to communicate, if you then continue to think about each word and expression, it's as if your elephant is found, yet you still search. If you misinterpret the words, they will only increase, and you'll never stop till you run out of thoughts. All the while straying further and further from the point. Like a child at play, you'll only end up exhausted. Even for a single phrase like "fetch the wood," out of context, there's no end to what it might mean. Yet, if you understand what's meant, there's no need for the words ends just there. The need for the words ends just there. Sorry. When a finger points to the moon, the ignorant look at the finger itself. Fools who are attached to language alone may think they understand, but it will not be easy. So if you understand the meaning, then there's the words are not all that necessary. Like for some people, just like blinking at them or winking at them, they'll get the point. And not getting to the real point or the meaning, there's no end to the words that you could get wrapped up in trying to find the meaning. So sometimes when the monks are debating, there's something that we call debating the words, and we get really annoyed with it. We'll say, quit debating the words. We're not getting anywhere. There's no point, you know, because but there are some teachers in Tibet like Chabachuki Sengye, and they, you know, there's so much like, you know, this word debate within their texts and in the Tibetan texts in general. Okay. Yeah. Okay. I'm not going to explain these verses. This is really
easy ones.
Easy ones.
No, digure.
So easy one, easy two in that. Sorry. The number that they turn down to Gasset Tangdon Matung Delta Setera.
So now this is the section on don't rely upon the provisional, but rely upon the definitive.
Number and Jubana, Tangdung, Eden, Shitene, Tangmi, Tona, Matan, Bangibi, Tona, Tenza, Kuncheni, Kuncheni, Dudzi, Kawan, Samba, Timba, Timbi, Tipi, Rabana, Kiji, Dumbajing, the dance.
71, when it comes to the meaning of what's taught, you should know the provisional and definitive and rely not on any provisional meaning, but on the meaning that has certain truth. The all-knowing one himself, in all his wisdom, taught in accord with the student's capacities and intentions, presenting vehicles of various levels, just like rungs of a ladder. Kembo has this little bear, and it's he has him like pointed his face like right where he's leaving off so he can keep his place on his text.
Milarepa je zupi sanji cha zun ken chu tang dong gen go ko ko gen ni bi de la do ji me se. Je zupi sanji cha zun ken. Okay,
so Milarepa has this saying where he says, the Lord, the complete Buddha, the liar. You keep deceiving us, like you keep, stirring us up with this provisional meaning, and we can't realize the ultimate.
That this song that the Trangdon said
and so when we're talking about provisional meaning, it's something that is taught, which you have to work with the person's mind in front of you. Like you're not talking about the reality, you're talking what they need, like what's working for them. If we were to just vomit up everything that we know,
then
people would just be shocked and think we're crazy.
This songs and that the Tambageta Tiparamba Gosing and the Nimavata Tipa Gosukurta. They chew the Tipa Gode, Jetanga Mela, Lord Rab, Rain Tamasomche, they really needing it send to the Gotseni. Then this chin that came to Dambana is honor.
And so then, in the early translation Nyingma school, we have what we refer to as the 9 vehicles of teachings that the Buddha taught. And so those are taught in accordance with beings of the lesser, middling, and greater capacity. And those are further divided into 3 each. And so that makes 9 total approaches to the Dharma. And so in the later schools, the newer schools of Tibetan Buddhism, then they have what they refer to as the path of the beings of the 3 capacities. So like mothers have a really good understanding of provisional and definitive meaning when they're raising their kids. They have to know like what food they can get them on first and then what they can get them to eat later and that sort of thing.
Stronger.
So if like a mother just thought, I want to make the kid really strong, so from the very beginning, I'm just going to make them eat meat all the time, the kid will die.
Meat and alcohol.
It wouldn't work out, right? And so the Buddha, what the Buddha taught to gradually lead people to, provisionally lead them further and further up is what we call provisional teachings. The definitive or the certain meaning, the definitive meaning teachings are the ultimate, like reality of what things are.
Okay. That the song that get down get the Trangdina Gupa Gongje Mulanete some song was there what they would dwell. That has it dead over China Nebayota, Semi Nebayota.
Okay.
Happen Gupas. That the he Gupachi or what?
No.
unite maina tenda wuji hibi guba ji orwata guba ane gongi de ki gongor wata o ndeji hie na ndeji yungre sambi gongba yeba ji bachi tega ra che ya baina tene tada ngaso dene ngom da jiba ge na ba yong sema je o ndeji na ten kangda charu.
And so if something is of provisional meaning, then it has to have three things like in place, three characteristics. One is that there's some purpose behind it. So it's not just like, I'm not just going to give you the ultimate truth. I'm going to say something else because there's a point. There's a reason for that for you. And then there's another one that is like, what is that going to lead to? If I say this, even though that's not the real reality, if I say this, what's that going to bring you? So that's the second point. The third is that if I just left it at that provisional, the thing that I told you right now, then there is further reasoning that could actually disprove that. I think if I don't give you an example, it's not gonna be settled for you.
Kongo de da yore some the better same shon zin yore da mere sen the better sheni den di oh take the chehi yore this honda den da yore se di guba de koronta kali chulin juya chi de guba de yore gongye dawote ngaso ko ne kap sang chi yore wa ta di phongbo nga chokpa ge ta da ji kunji de ji ba yore de yore wa de cham chel gongye de cham chel cheni ani te zu hi bi zon oh da yore da sin le bi zon ta ngu se ne ba de ga ra ya na teni ta ka se de pe ne ta nga so di ri pa te so ta hi che undu kala dan thong ko mendo ne pa te re ta.
And so, like, for example, in some of the Hinayana teachings, in some perspectives, the Buddha taught some people that there is a self. And it's because those people would have been terrified by the idea of telling them that the self doesn't exist. And so it's the purpose is to help lead them slowly into the Dharma. And then there is this, even though the self doesn't exist, because they have a body and they have consciousness and they have karmic conditioning factors and they have, all of these processes happening, then by telling them they have a self, it helps them to have something which is helping them to practice the Dharma. It's like some foundation for them to work with. And then the fact that can be disproven is that if we look into what the self is in the ultimate the investigation of the ultimate truth, we find that self doesn't exist. So there's some ability to be disproved if we left that saying that self exists, if we left that as it is and we didn't leave it as provisional, but if we said that was ultimate, that actually has some harm by further reasoning or further investigation.
And
so then, but when the Buddha said that the self doesn't exist, then that became a definitive meaning teaching, just as it is.
Okay. That teaches down between the dance. Gongya Kanga Gonis, Dengong Gomba Jetav, Dra Jin la Tsema ye, no Kang Gongsa Songba Yang, Tesa Trumta Yadana, touching Dodi Tiki Par, Homi Mato Chakangi, Gomi Saver Tsepa ye, Long Yin Ripi Cherry Trabi, Toning Ipi Turnzamba, Chelio Onji Namba Yin, Turnchu.
Wisely, he spoke with certain intentions in mind. And with the 8 kinds of implied or indirect instructions, if taken literally, those would be invalidated, but were spoken for specific reasons. From the 4 schools of Buddhist philosophy through to the ultimate Vajra vehicle, aspects not fully realized by lower approaches are made clear by those who are more advanced. Seeing it to be superior according to the texts and logic, the intelligent sees the definitive meaning like a swan drawing milk from water and revel in the ocean of Buddhist teachings.
Now, so that the down the long chain bag and the song yando down that chuni the yini temba down revala the chuni the yini that penati chuni the yini that they that penat lord over in our sender over revala. The chuni te yini to be low the temba tigita de so needings. The tembig, then kainanda, thank you inanda, they tamket sama, then ngedong yong ngedong do ngedong tenkyusini patenjini tsechures.
And so Longchenpa says that generally speaking that the true reality of suchness and the subjective luminous mind are the definitive meaning, as well as the Buddha's speech, the commentarial texts, and the sutras and so forth, which explain that meaning, are texts or scriptures of definitive meaning. So the mind and the object, the luminous mind and the object of suchness are definitive meaning, as well as the texts that describe those are of definitive meaning.
Ta yang telan juya ge chedela ta ti kangza yoba taikona da chu yoba taikona ta ko chi salam ta chi kar ya no ne ti ta te so sama te ni di trangdong no ya go des.
And then anything that is assisting one to get to that, whether that be a presentation of the self-existing or presentation of various things existing, different phenomena existing, and so forth, presentations of the various paths of practice and the bodhisattva bhumis, the levels of realization, and so forth, all of that are provisional teachings.
Kasi dekhe nyimbi chani xie yawa dekhe ta deso ta yang kasi re di nge de yin se tende sungpa yo re ngan bala
Nika
re la che dekhe nyimbu ta kasi dekhe nyimbu tenpa ina dekhe ta deso ta nge de yin se
okay
ta dekhe nyimbu pe na di ka pa pe ka sal tong chani ten de ko ra ba Tami ka sal nang chani xie de ko ra ba
ani Namchag chani sunya de nge de yin se ko ra ba
ta dekhe nyimbi chani re ta
las
ye na sama nang cha ma re.
Okay, and so then in the middle turning of the wheel sutras, it's talking about the nature of mind just being emptiness. Whereas in the third turning of the wheel, the nature of mind is discussed in terms of the luminous quality of the appearing and luminous aspect of mind, which is also referred to as the Buddha nature. And so in the early translation school of the Nyingma, that perspective or that discussion of that luminous appearing aspect of the nature of mind is referred to also as definitive meaning.
La so ta dino chi gongba ye da dengong ye de so he yan do se ba ta di chi sing da ji ma te se lam na ma to yen da di de so pe te chi mang ta do sa re sra la.
So there are these 8 kinds of implied or indirect instructions. They're mentioned here, but it's really too much information to get into here.
Ani da di gongba ye se dengen de ta che de da wo ji re ta the check the days to come down at the check, Rava, the de Pache Tamadana, the Jig Long Jawich. Jela, the Dijela Peneta Kogore. Tapena Pechayana, that the day Gumba Yagan, the Peki Yana, that Zongjer, Pemon Cassage. Zongjer, Jatido. That di go kala jani churong di unipan jisuna ani churong kawa tong dikpa tando racing it out in the order. That di kasi churong tata rang tani tsama chendo racing yomarta. Maung pana dig pacha jani churong di chando racing it out. That sick de ko tata di tata love yari the maung palpasang tang yaraso. That dindo then dindi yere telata gumba yes.
So let me just give you an example of one of these things. So like, for example, it's kind of like saying some words and those words aren't really not true, but they're true in a different way. That's like maybe down the road. It's not exactly what you might think it is. So like, for example, there is some Dharani mantras, like we have it stuck on the wall over here. And it says that if you stick this above a door and you walk under it, 1,000 eons of negativity and misdeeds will be purified by that. But it doesn't say they will be purified in this instant. So even though it says they will be purified, what it means is that will place some kind of mental imprint into your mind that will lead you in the future to be able to purify those obscurations like that.
And ngamanga so tawat semola chini. That tawat is a gold jandu. Oh, the Nachu get that Jagomari Corchon, Chantunga Yung the Chains in Yang, Mando Yanga Chantunga Yungi.
And so the monks, sometimes we would joke about this. We'd have these stuck above our doors and we'd say, yeah, I don't need to do any other Dharma practice. I'm just going to like come into your room and drink some tea. And then I'm going to go back outside and drink some tea. And then I'm going to come back in again.
That Delata Gumba, yes,
And so those are the kinds of implied or indirect instructions.
다 dengung yeseji 해야죠. 다 dengung ye대 다 드라 책임바 땅에 killen지 뱅이지. 드라데 베데코 축보진에 라위양해지. 조죽진에 베데 조죽진에 라위양해. 베데코 고와 옌바진에 알롱도 전 랭고야라고 지요.
So that first one was maybe like a more of what we call an implied instruction. And this one is an indirect instruction, which means it's really talking in circles. It doesn't really talk about the main point. It kind of like loops around and finally might kind of come back in an indirect way.
아니 데 빼제야나 아니 파기 논다네 파다 마인 세자인 세요.
So like, for example, in one of the texts, it says that your mother and father are things that should be killed. Or, yeah.
다 던다 가르치고 시디깔라 데네 레다 녀몽바데 베당아서 디 동아 제제레스 레다 녀몽바니 데데네 디 빵고레 세고.
But what's really meant is that karma and afflictive emotions and afflictive mental states are what cause your suffering, and those should be abandoned.
Oh, that is quite the cancer land on the cancer doors.
So if you understood that in a strange way, there's something strange that could be understood, you know?
Okay. Oh, that they know what it is.
So anyway, there are things like that. When it says 8 kinds of implied or indirect, there's 4 of each, 4 indirect, 4 implied.
That digging that take Sanji get the master the treatise on Karkando here, me that some new long the go. That's thing. So the young dama. Sama koron the heba the demba in the mipet matsaman jupor chebal te chatan hakwache and a young mataduna pe costabu yoris.
And so when you know these kind of divisions and understandings of definitive versus provisional and so forth, you know that presentation before, and then you look into all the text, then it's very good, it's very clear to be able to understand the meaning of all these things. Okay, I'm going to continue through the text here.
Samo doji tiba yang tadok sogi jita bi jibi menga tangdu bi temeri bi tenla chukun yene takpa ta nyamni chembo sungjoba yangda chema ni jene tenla bi dang kai pharo chingda jeba ta zoda zoba chembo ye chode chekje bin ta je se nelang ga me jupa ye dang bi deng tamna loden Loden chuk de javi sin zeme chuter chava ye longtok tembi jansen.
So now, verse 76 says, the teachings on the profound Vajra vehicle are also sealed by means of the 6 limits and 4 modes, but can be definitively established by stainless reasoning accompanied by the pith instructions of the lineage. The inseparable union of the primordial purity and great equalness of all phenomena is the point that is definitively established by the 2 authentic valid cognitions. Applying the key points of the literal, general, hidden, and ultimate meaning without any conflict in the approaches of the paramitas, development phase, completion phase, and the great perfection, one gains the confidence of certainty about reality. Then the supremely intelligent heirs of the Buddhas come to master an inexhaustible treasury of Dharma as a sign of victory for the teachings of scripture and realization.
And
so generally speaking, those presentations of the provisional and ultimate and the indirect and what's the other word? Indirect and implied teachings are generally presentations found in the sutras or context of the sutras, but can also be applied to the tantras. But there's a particular presentation in the Vajrayana of the 6 limits and the 4 modes. And so there are 2 presentations of those 6 limits, but I'll give you a simple presentation coming from something that Ishe Tsogyal asked to Guru Rinpoche and then his explanation to her question.
And then Guru Rinpoche
And so Guru Rinpoche said, first, then Vajrayana is something ultimately that has to be put into practice.
냠내 제야 타데 라마라 톡도 요레스.
And so the limit or the end of Vajrayana is your practice. The limit of where the limit of that practice meets with your teacher, your guru. And the ultimate or the limit of that guru meets with their pith instructions. And the ultimate end or whatever of that pith instruction should be that you have to gain an experience. For you as the disciple needs to gain an experience ultimately from that instruction. And so then the limit or the extreme of that experience needs to lead you to what we call accomplishment. When we talk about someone being learned and accomplished, we're talking about that accomplishment, that, attainment through practice. And then the ultimate completion or perfection of that accomplishment is the attainment of Buddhahood. And so those are the 6 limits. So it's like the limit of Vajrayana is practice. The limit of practice is the guru. The words don't really work with the word limit. It's kind of difficult to translate exactly according to that. But the extreme or the finality maybe.
That's all you did. Take it then. Sold the take it so, baby so, tato.
And the 4 modes are written here. So they say that they are the literal, general, hidden, and ultimate meaning. So those are the 4 modes.
That the Gaseri take it so say on the Tadi and Donganibo the Kahila de Drantun Tabasset in the Yoreta. Dratiba imbala, main tiba imbala, turned up Hatang the Chipando Yamitendri. And so in
the first one, it says the literal. So the literal is like the mode of the words. And so what that refers to is that the same word can show up in a sutra text and a tantric text, but have a completely different meaning depending on context. And that is the mode of the word or the literal mode.
Ta lamche chad gore tam kashi ngan dol gadukala ngala koban tapchini oh ta teda kochik pedichi matek bag jong re se ya ngala gange te zondol khoso de peti tapjari singedo tendri ki chenge yo na de thamche la chama de ne che oh ka se ta di nyam de rogo hora de nyam de rodo gal tene di ta oh di ka se sanga ge te pena ta ta yagi no yoji te yitate so ane magin do no la tene chini yore das do no yoji te so ya sanga no la tene yore das ine ko menga te se manda bare sin tene chini yama chini do nga nin chamjor chini hiya te ta de.
And so the general mode means that these are, whether we're talking about sutra or tantra, these are generally talking of one path. So they are common, maybe is a better word than general. And so what's meant is that, there are some people who really like the Sutrayana path, and they totally talk bad about the Vajrayana path. They say, it's not even Buddhist. It's like some other tradition, like maybe some kind of like whatever, like Hindu thing or something like that. And some people who really like the Vajrayana who say, the sutra path is just really inferior, and they talk bad about the sutra path. And so, but what we need to be doing is seeing them as something together, that they are a common path, that they are, that they share all these features. And that as you are practicing and seeing different teachings in the Mahayana or in the sutra path, you can see how those teachings apply to and are true as well in the Vajrayana context, and certain features of the Vajrayana as well that are shared with and are also practiced in the normal Sutrayana teachings, although the pith instructions, the ways of putting them into practice may have some differences.
And so both
of these are necessary, both the sutra and tantra approach, for someone to attain liberation. But if, because of our grasping to one side or another, we're just contented with one at the expense of the other or at the casting out of the other, then we're going to get stuck and we're not going to be able to make much progress. So that's a particular feature of the Vajrayana, is knowing the Sutra and Tantra to be in common.
아니 비비 초세지도 다 비비 초세 등에서 탐지 다 빼는 나서로 고 랑징이 다고 비디오 다 추니께서 나서 랑징 통통금도 하다 마도 데고 뭐 세계기 거 바길래 까비에 말해 공유 말다 고 랑징 코로 비디오 하다.
And when it says the hidden meaning or the hidden mode, what it's being talked about is something is naturally hidden from us. Like we naturally are not able to see the ultimate reality. It's not like we're hiding it from someone. It's that it's hidden from us naturally. There's so much that is explained about that point.
아니다 타토봐 타토고 베리다 타토 가리마 되다는 워서데다 나는 믹스에다 다니면다 와도 워서데서 해고르와
and so
워서데서 해고르스.
The ultimate meaning in Vajrayana is what we refer to as the luminosity, sometimes referred to as clear light or utter luminosity. So that is the ultimate meaning according to the Vajrayana.
라서 아니다 데데 손잔다 너드 손한다 추 Trangdonamata, Nidonata, Seditela, Ani, da, Nidon the Trangdoni, Ani, Gong Dengong J, Anin Tato, so you that is what
So there's so much that could be more that could be explained about all these points that have come up: the provisional meaning, the ultimate meaning, the implied teaching, the indirect teaching, these 4 modes, the 6 limits, and so forth.
So
now we are finished with the section about don't rely upon the provisional, rely upon the ultimate. And so now when we get into the last of those 4 reliances, which is for that ultimate meaning, don't rely upon the ordinary consciousness, but rely upon primordial wisdom.
That neither nyamse lebana dratu jinrang zonzin number hila matumba nime ihi nilata mipa change danin zondan zimbi rangin sem ti gang make tether zun chunik turn la mumrai ngubo make that make nisi make that niming make Jeter make a mikpa gangzong dujena. Yo yin dolis no. Gada driba gangijan, mikpa nipa manipi. Saya meba tonitro. Zondan zimba puntani rangjong yi rangwesar. Taji driba kun keban ndene yi chu the song. Nimi zogla milong yin zibi tengun tongmanyo. Jeta samja mehibi ziba nana trakwa je. Anja yangda longda na takungupi rikpatang lami menga toblin na mektab yin the rang la nang. Tetse tekin hikpa ye chuji duzo ro nyongbi depi gawa jibi mek. Dehe yihi koto de ndene chuna malupa. Nyamba niden tatsimbi jeme ngipi deng tapjang. Zeme chunzu juling. Julan case. Deni Solan Kizibi, Deni Sungo, Tongse, Ningbica de Puncentar. Tauku daily Yover he. That's a dehi Tamchi, Tauku Yanda, Lamo he. Turned day, Tembala, Yiki Dopa Neva J. Many he Chuktabi, Sita Hini, Nanga Dror. So many Ninja Chimbo June, Sota Duja, Mantachas.
91. Okay. Oh, so back to for me, I have to scroll back. Back to or onto verse number 80. When taking the definitive meaning into experience, do not rely upon the ordinary dualistic mind that chases after words and concepts, but upon non-dual wisdom itself. That which operates with conceptual ideas is the ordinary mind, whose nature is dualistic, involving perceiver and perceived. All that it conceptualizes in this way is false and can never reach the actual nature of reality. Any idea of something real or unreal, both or neither, any such concept, however it's conceived, is still only a concept, and whatever ideas we hold in mind are still within the domain of Mara. This has been stated in the sutras. It is not by any assertion or denial that we put an end to concepts, but once we see without rejecting or affirming, there is freedom. Although it is without any perceiving subject or object perceived, there is naturally occurring wisdom that is aware of itself. All ideas of existence non-existent, both and neither have ceased completely. This is said to be supreme primordial wisdom. Just like the orb of the sun, to someone who's blind since birth, this has never been seen by the spiritually immature. However much they think about it, they fail to understand, and so it is only a cause of fear in the minds of the foolish. Yet through scriptures of authentic origin, reasoning that refutes all four conceptual extremes, and the force of the master's practical instructions, it arises in our experience like sight that is restored. At that time, with a faith that comes from savoring the nectar-like taste of the Buddha Dharma, our eyes open widely in purest joy, and we glimpse the Buddha's wisdom kaya. In this, all things without exception are seen in their ultimate state of equality, and with this certainty about what is itself beyond expression, skillfully one expresses the unending treasury of Dharma. Having become learned in the ways of the two truths, when seeing the reality of their inseparable unity, one knows that just as a husk is removed to reveal the grain, all the various methods are simply to lead one to this point. With the thought, skilled in means are the Buddhas, and all these methods make a genuine path. An irreversible sense of confidence will arise in the teachers and their teachings. By gaining the supreme non-abiding wisdom, naturally one is freed from the extremes of existence and quiescence, and the ornament of the great and effortless compassion arises to pervade throughout the furthest reaches of space and time.
Lazo ta dinuna ta chetang ge pe nam hi se undu ta karche lo kokor se de ta rapa ta de chene da re ta nam hi se de kala ta dra ta to pi jisen ronge reba dra to gu ne jisen ronge ta dra to min kon re ro gore dra to gu jisen ronge te ya te ne di zonwa dan zba tate pi na ba je reba la tamche te ne di
So when we're talking about ordinary mind or ordinary consciousness as opposed to this wisdom mind or primordial wisdom, what we're talking about then is a mind that is working with words and concepts, or a mind that is acting in a state of duality with the perceiver, the subjective perceiver, and the object which is perceived as by that subjective mind. And so any dualistic phenomena or dualistic perception is referred to as mind or consciousness.
Aninda ki yihi se undika lata dhammge nilog chembige chenchang manga parabala zungzing tiba medenge.
And when we talk about primordial wisdom as opposed to mind or consciousness, we're talking about that unceasing awareness or unceasing wisdom of the primordial reality, the way things have always been in their reality, which is free from any dualistic grasping.
And
that primordial wisdom is said to be like the treasure trove from which compassion and all other uncontaminated qualities arise from.
Pajedi tizondo woda tatanga chitanga samatana digre ina tan de karesi he said dingen muni ye demge nelo chatawa yinde matraba hingechi telatan zungzing triba thamchi tene namni tene chuthang je tene kaseta nime nyaba chimbitan thongeji lata chetang ya gogres.
And so, in a more coarse or general way of talking, we could say that the differences between mind and primordial wisdom are similar to what was described before when we were talking about the differences between the two types of minds that perceive the conventional truth. The one that is of a purified, the purified perception of a pure mind, the way it perceives ordinary reality, and the normal mind of an untrained or impure being. How we had those differences of the nature, the cause, the result, and so forth. But more specifically, what we're talking about here is not just the kind of purified vision of conventional reality, but the actual realization that wisdom mind recognizing the primordial true nature, which is unafflicted or uncontaminated by any kind of dualistic grasping.
That's so. That in this home, that so tata, Casere, Namshiki, your Jibati, so Tangela, Mata, Dembache, Yomare, Saman Jodure. Tai Shiki Jibati, Gita, the Solata, Casere call. Oh, Casere, Nilu Sonza, call it in the Jabati, Chungres, Natan Joa Maris or Joa Mese, Labro.
And so anything that is the realm of experience of mind or consciousness can't be posited as being something true or real, because it's changeable. It's always changing. Whereas whatever is the experiential realm of primordial wisdom, because it is the true reality, it's unchanging.
Nasuga pere semte dan jwa indai. Ani de mai ba pena namjoba long kopsela nyamlenda te so tamchi la tene ka se long koma la dru du kala womi ki tene di mami ki to kwanda te chaman jodu re. So tama ko semge dibat chadi kora.
And so, for example, like our mind, of course, is always changing. But even a yogin who is practicing the path and who's traversing higher and higher in their path of practice, higher in their level of realization, they're lower, the level that they have gone beyond has now changed. So even their mind is changing. So their experience, because it's still changing, is still something which is contained within that quality of ordinary mind.
So the which chain at Namshi, so re some gravate in a temaimba. That tato rangula, she did Jula Machipa, then tato chakio mares.
Tartu de Jula Machipa.
La. So good that Namshi did that at own tone the Hidua. So the Jitan sent the Latina, Namshi did so tone the Hidua. They in and tato won the Tonchina, then I say, she did Jula Machipa Padilla, Namshi the Yik mares. Tambaya. Tamba Yenoni de Chedivataco. Tamba Yenonita.
Is it Jula Machig Pardu?
Namshi de Yik Dongmare, Yichi Mares. Namhiloko Yichi Yomarata.
Okay.
Namhili in the Tamba Yishi Yavan.
Yo.
Namhili Dongmare, Yishili.
Okay. And so, for us in our ordinary experience, our experience of ordinary mind or of consciousness is dominant. And we think of that as the primary factor of our life or our experience. But, until we reach a full experience of primordial wisdom, we shouldn't be putting our faith in the experience of consciousness, of ordinary mind. So when we're talking about the four reliances, that's what's meant to not rely upon consciousness, but rely upon primordial wisdom.
And then this homes on da get on the Dirichel depend Tatogu Taria Togu de Galata, Sam Tatangasochi, Seman Tatogo with Yomarevela, Seman Tatogo with the Yaya, Jelu de Pansanji, Hill to
And so ultimately speaking, we have levels of valid cognition, which are becoming more and more purified. But ultimately speaking, the ultimate or final level of valid cognition is primordial wisdom itself.
Kasi the woman, the so tamji, Nikop Semare, in and Tatola Yando Sadical, the so tamji, then Kunjodu the water.
And so all of those lower levels of what we can call valid cognitions, they are valid in their context. But ultimately, ultimately speaking, the primordial wisdom is the actual valid, state, and all of those things are changeable. They're, transient.
Kasi the Nilo de Case, Thanks about the Toxumaya, the Gasati ko Gasere, the Chando, the D Cheba de Chando Horoko. So that Tahi about someone Nilo de Togo, the Todu Galat Cassette Tahi Yaba.
And so, like when we are when we are starting to understand or realize that ultimate reality, then we keep going deeper. We keep going deeper and more profound in our understanding. And so until we reach that full level of primordial wisdom, everything that we're experiencing is still changeable. It's still changing. There's still more depth, more profundity to go into.
Okay, so
I shouldn't keep explaining, or you guys aren't going to get any sleep today. And so then Mipham Rinpoche talked about all of these discussions of validity and valid cognitions and so forth. And then in the end, he talks about what is the result of having all of these types of valid cognition and all this understanding of validity and so forth. And so and so then at the end here, Mipham Rinpoche talks about the eight treasuries of confidence, which are the results of this validity or valid cognitions.
Drive samo yeshija nawa number jibina repeat yings jitabi pobitakin jetrotes hunchi tuda sambi ore the pobitakin jetrotes tambotan dini cinta dini jere.
And so on 92 it says the correct approach to the two truths is realized through contemplating the four reasonings. In this way it brings the four genuine reliances. From such a supreme and flawless cause as this comes the result of the profound primordial wisdom. When this experience is developed to its fullest, it releases the 8 great treasuries of confidence that were sealed within the absolute space of awareness.
Then ripa na ba ye servala ya tu na da jimri ngo ni sam theba ta chi ba ten de ripa na ba ye rala ye sambi then de zeli de ta da temba ye ko malopa dan demba de so tamchi then de je se do.
And so what are the causes then of the release of the 8 great treasuries of confidence? So those are the contemplating of the four reasonings. Those four reasonings were the reasoning of knowing the causes, knowing that the results rely upon those causes, knowing the essential nature of things, and then knowing the validity of those. And then the function of those four reasonings is to be able to correctly follow the four reliances. And so those things, the four reliances and the four reasonings, are the causes of the opening or the release of the 8 great treasuries of confidence. And so the result, what is referred to as these 8 treasuries of great confidence, this is referring to the unfolding of the experience of primordial wisdom.
아니 나서 짠이 푹 마타비게다 추기니로 타토바데서 탐치다 코파기를 베이가 받아고 지레발 대 탐치게 더한테야 베이가 받아버대요 되는 탐치 통보레스.
And so this expansive, this vision or this experience of primordial wisdom that expands in all directions, is this ultimate reality, which is something which is what we refer to as an extremely hidden phenomena, something that we can't even imagine. But when we reach that point, then all of these extremely hidden phenomena become manifest to us. We can see them all. They become our experience.
고적 차지 힘도 고적 차지 다 섬이어서 그러다 열라 대체운데 힘도 고적 차지 당가서 다양 통루지야 말다 다 늘고 무슨 통구야 말다 땅은 좀 통구여 봐다 다 선발은 로서디가 다 그런 통루지야 말다 빼는지 니롱 다 타도 빼는지 다 생 니롱도 다 대한 통루지야 다 대도제라 아니 다 롱체마데 다 될 롱체마데 야부 요스는
And so in the pramana texts, these texts on validity or valid cognition, they talk about the three objects, which are the manifest, the things that we can directly perceive, the things that are hidden, and things that are extremely hidden. So direct phenomena are things that we can directly perceive. We don't need any reasoning for it. Hidden phenomena are things that we can understand by way of some kind of logical reasoning. And then there are the extremely hidden phenomena, which are things that we can't even understand through a logic and reasoning. And so those things can only be established by what we refer to as the validity of like a text or the validity of the speech of the Buddha and so forth. So like what we refer to as a scriptural validity.
Kapatiya, that dig song the chichen and wrong ducala, and then the hila caton barba that any tama coronda di on some that jibani, then on some tonati do or that dig go grace.
And so, like, for example, like the nature of mind, like then there was this, that's something that's this extremely hidden phenomena. But first, what we have to do to be able to rely upon the Buddha's teaching as valid is we have to establish the Buddha as a valid teacher in the first place. So there's a whole thing about that where we establish the Buddha's validity, then we gain trust in what the Buddha had taught, then we follow his teachings and practices going through the calm abiding, special insight, and so forth. And finally, we're led to a direct experience in yogic direct perception of that extremely hidden phenomena.
Like those
three levels of reality, like direct, hidden, and extremely hidden, don't have to necessarily be talked about Dharma stuff. You could just talk about like any old object. Have those three factors. So like you have So like even we could even have a level of this extremely hiddenness in terms of a car where you not only can't see it, you can't even estimate where it is through like some reasoning, but there's a description of where it is in some book, and you, by believing that book, you could follow the book as a valid reason and find your way to get to the car. But first of all, for that to work, you have to have trust in the author of the book. And then by having that trust, then you follow what they said and you do whatever needs to be done. You fix the car, you do whatever you need to do, you go there.
Okay. Yeah. Oh, no more.
Okay, so now there's the 8 great treasures, the Yanju Chisonanda. Okay. And so the first one is scriptures heard and contemplated in the past are never forgotten. This is the treasury of recollection. So that's number 1. And so the next one is knowing precisely their profound and vast points. This is the treasury of intelligence. So that's the realization of the profound and vast points. And the next is the one of the next is the treasure of realization. So it says understanding all the themes of the Sutra and Tantra collections. This is the treasure of realization. never forgetting any detail from one's studies. This is the treasure of retention, or dharani is the other word for this.
That's the ore ale tambo popa koran himda. Di popa se undi that's ngaso tadi sem go popa de la kona digres ngaso.
And so what I forgot to even explain what's meant by the confidence. So this list has a called the 8 treasuries of confidence. So what is meant by confidence?
Da penno da popa se de tada di mohan mochila yang jambi yang goni popa dribya ta zong dribya de zong se de komme jeba de ba popa se undi da di ka se de ta di sem ge penata loto blaso ba de dribje ge podup de yore mixe
Namland.
Popa de ore jambi yang choa de.
And so Mipham Rinpoche has some practice texts which are working with Manjushri in order to develop that confidence, which is like, your courageousness, and also to develop your retention, your memory.
Ta penanga so di tada gangi jendo so ta di yet so na tani ngaso da popa je chagre da popa jegi no ni jedwala di yet so yona ta ko di kasire mje pa dang ta kasire pe chu teng de demba de so yeba ina ko do pha she ya la tani kasire popa yore phagi ko teng do ji yore wa khoro teng de yodi ko popi je chanu yo.
And so if we have all of these, like, previous mention, we went through 4 of these, that is giving you confidence. Like if you need to teach the Dharma and you don't forget anything that you learned before, and you retain all of that, and you've realized the truth, then that brings you this confidence. That gives you courage to explain it to others, right?
Nag jabu singe and rawati sekiduata uni tarniga tapeko tik hlada transonda setamugo surrender which gita khona ji zo jamna gora chena ta thubya ga koro popa thubya chan yo mare tindo manjik bi popa de sanjeli yo de teaching nag jabu singe ta sekiduwa.
And so like we refer to the Buddha as the Lord of speech, like the king of speech, who's like has this lion-like speech, who no matter what, other divine beings, other Brahmins and so forth, he has no fear that any of them will ever argue or debate or try to refute his teachings.
Oh, and
so those were the 4 causes, and now there's 4 resultant treasures. And so the 5th of these 8 of this list of 8 is satisfying all beings with excellent explanations. That is the treasure of confidence. So once you have known all of this, then you also know how to satisfy others with your knowledge. Safeguarding the precious treasury of teachings. This is the treasure of Dharma. And so the teachings are protected by way of cutting through the misunderstandings of others, and by taking care of disciples and the teachings and so forth. Not severing the continuous line of the 3 jewels. This is the treasure of bodhicitta. And so there's no severing of the line of the 3 jewels, because you have attained Buddhahood for yourself. You teach the Dharma, so you're Buddha, you're expressing Dharma and gathering Sangha. So that is maintaining the continuity of the 3 jewels. Gaining acceptance of the nature of equality beyond arising. That is the treasure. This is the treasure of accomplishment.
Matrava Mase, Tarompe, Gawa, Shinkanija Gawa Towndu, and Satambur the Gawa said the main Tajor.
So, like for example, like a lot of people like us, we have such grasping towards the reality of things that when we're told about these profound teachings of emptiness and so forth, we're terrified by them. We're scared of that. But when someone has seen the reality of that, they're not only not afraid of it, they're also joyful about it, such that the first bhumi, the first bodhisattva bhumi, where one directly experiences the reality of emptiness, then that first bhumi itself, that first bodhisattva level, is referred to as extremely joyous.
That tender we poppy techable G young and Yoba, you know, Sirvala. Dedam Mazepi, Techangela, Wangjo Kangs.
So someone who has that, so it says in 98, someone who has mastered these 8 great inexhaustible treasures will never separate from them and will be praised by the Buddhas and their heirs and become a sovereign of the 3 worlds.
Oh, that is what I'm Sanji
and so you will be, praised by all of the Buddhas and become like a guide and protector for all the 3 realms. And so next we are talking about the results of having presented all of this text.
Chemer Joba Javi song, Ravala, Chemer Joba Javi song, Chema Tag Tripinas, Chemi Lamning Nikibi, Chemi song Dedi Tong.
The valid teachings of the victorious Buddhas are established by the valid cognitions. So by developing confidence through the valid path, the true result of the valid teachings will be seen.
That the Chemi song Dedi Tong se on the Galatanguni, Sanji song big. Then begin river, then Tato Patazokaji, someone Tongres, then Tongala Teni, Tongriba, Tadicini, Sapke Drogre, Langa Drogres, Tato Sanjigres, Tesonguya.
And so what's being said is that when you see the validity of the Buddha's teachings, then the ultimate result of that is that one will put that into practice and one will gradually go through the 10 bodhisattva levels, the 5 paths, and eventually attain Buddhahood. For themselves. So now we're into the conclusion, which is the virtuous in the end, the concluding verses.
Oh, that's what that Tama gave it that Tama gave it that. Ziba Hinga Namdaji, Tuki Chimbon, Tasamba, Dever Hippe, Lamtembi, Dag Kanye, Ditzero, Dada, Dada Ripa, Yetang Na, say. Yi go ni nyong he ki di zu go shan den ze jiang ni mi wang ge ding sang na di li do bi cho je na ten bi rong chu nyong ka bi tong na hla bi sang ba dang ten la chu de gu bi lu lun de san lu so de na ji ya go sa de go.
Yes. With noble vision, completely and utterly pure, and great compassion that has reached perfection, the bliss-gone Buddha revealed the path and said, the taste of this nectar I've discovered should be experienced by means of the 4 reasonings and the 4 reliances. Although a portion of this elixir has now been shared in this modern age rife with degeneration, through all the methods that run counter to this approach, it is difficult to savor the supreme taste of the teachings. With this in mind, and with altruistic intention and a mind of supreme devotion for the teachings, I've here briefly explained how to generate the immaculate wisdom that is born of reflection.
Nima nga se jerma le che nima tabi nima nyomon bi nima tene tugu nima semjeng nima ta nga indu ta ka se ka le khobores.
And so Mipham Rinpoche is saying, even though I have instructed you with these 4 reliances, the proper way of going through the 4 reliances, now we're in this age of the 5 degenerations, the degeneration of our lifespans. the degeneration of our ideas and views, the degeneration of our afflictive minds, the degeneration of the time, the degeneration of beings. It's very difficult for that to have an effect on people, even though I've instructed as such. So in the Dharma teachings, it said, in these 5 degenerations, like our lifespan gets shorter, our view becomes coarser or worse, our afflictions become more rampant, and so forth. Beings become worse and worse, and so forth. So, through the merit of this, may all beings become the very equal of Manjushri. And so, Mipham Rinpoche has then made the aspiration here that through all of these explanations, may all beings become equal to that of Manjushri, and we should make that same kind of aspiration. Turn towards the sun of Manjushri's speech. The water-born lotus of my heart opens in devotion. May these golden honey drops of excellent explanation become a plentiful feast for the bees of good fortune. Listen.
So it said
that Mipham Rinpoche, he had a statue of Manjushri that he could talk to directly, and that that statue actually, Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche received that statue, and then after he passed away, it's contained within his reliquary. And so there's famous Gelugpa Lama named Jamin Shepa. He was one of the heads of one of the big monasteries, and he was spending 3 years writing these argument letters back and forth with Mipham Rinpoche, arguing about Mipham Rinpoche's view of emptiness and stuff. And he could never win. He had all these other geishas in the Gelugpa school telling him, "Oh, you need to argue like this and like that," and they would have a discussion, and he could never win. And he's like, "What's going on?" And then one of his guys went and met Mipham Rinpoche, and he saw Mipham Rinpoche talking with the statue, and then Jamin Shepa gave up. He said, "How can I win? He's talking directly with Manjushri."
And then, Jamgo Mohan Muchege, that the Tangachi, Mohang, Marin Javiang, Tangachi, like Sungre say, the Nichi Reco, the Tanga, the Hama Pad Dakini, the part the Hamangala, the Narason. The Nichi say, the logit in Hojere, Hakome.
And so I don't know exactly, but there's also a story that Rinpoche had a Tanka painting of Manjushri, and he could talk to that painting. And I got a picture of that. I don't really know exactly the story though.
So, oh, Jiban the Nene, Hani Tundu, Yabaji the Nechankiba, Lazan Janze Kola Kornise, Satung Lo, Hodas and Binyegni, Ni Jeglas, Jabber Jibitiba, Mangalam, Choloka Jata, Ije.
And so I had the intention to write this for a while, but in accord with the recent request made by the learned scholar Laksam Jeltsin, it was written in a single day by Jampa Jepa. That's one of Mipham Rinpoche's names. That's his pen name. On the 29th day of the 3rd month of the Sakyong year, the wood bird, 1885, Magalam, there are 104 verses, virtue.
Good timing.
Yeah.
Come on, let go do that.
We only made it 2 minutes late. We only went 2 minutes late.
La so en de song dan da di ke tang de jang go mo han de tan jambi yang yi la te song khorong ya ma da ngi hir mo ji dreme sing de gong lo je la da di pe shu ji de ji yore sira la da de ji pe de u ma go ko la da ha le ya ka de che mo ji de da pe na de ge ji ti ni da de nga so pe de ki ba pa je lo ka se de jang na de da tu ma tha ngen de ji pe yong. So
there's really no doubt that that Mipham Rinpoche is Manjushri himself. As we can see that Mipham Rinpoche wrote the Precious Beacon of Certainty at the age of 8, and it's full of all the most difficult points of the middle way teachings, such that people, many great scholars who spend their whole lives studying, still can't penetrate the depths of that teaching. So these days it seems that there probably aren't any more of Mipham Rinpoche's students still living. They've all passed away, but Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche met him. And so like when Khyentse Rinpoche met Mipham Rinpoche when he was very young, and Mipham Rinpoche had these pills, these blessed pills that were consecrated through the practice of Manjushri. And so when Mipham Rinpoche was very young, when Khyentse Rinpoche was very young, Mipham Rinpoche came to him and took that pill and wrote the seed syllable D, which is the seed syllable of the Manjushri mantra, on his tongue. And if you see the videos of Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche teaching, there's no cessation, there's no obstruction to his speech. He's just talking there's no thought involved. He doesn't have to think about what he's going to say.
Anta penanga sodo buchine da pe kawazamu chungde ta di mahang kambam de jabjin chenje khonai kundu ne wang da long chat sangwa de ta bagi namdo la phabjine jabji thon mu chi dende shu chine ani bagi la songbare.
And so we were extremely fortunate that when I was living in Namdrolling Monastery, Khen Rinpoche invited Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche to give the empowerments and reading transmissions of the entire Mipham Rinpoche's collected works. So I was fortunate enough to be able to receive that.
And then the song that in younger Mahwan Muchigi young the sort of Jeta Murab Dungupala. And then got it love the church and drogres in it, and the song your race on Khen Mutikata, song who did any young girl to the Shayi Sare.
And so,
the song that Angala did in it of Chintan Muchikuni, Raju, then in Devan the dog in it to you, Mare. The name Mal Long Rare. The ring also here dug Nanula de Conde and the Tigre, that the thing and did Sava the Samalo zone this Chesha.
And so then there's a saying. So I heard this from Khen Rinpoche Kataya, one of my teachers, that Mipham Rinpoche's all of his teachings for 7 generations after his life would become even more powerful. The power of the blessings would become greater and greater. And I believe that was actually something that Mipham Rinpoche said himself. And so I was able to receive all of those reading transmissions and so forth from Khyentse Rinpoche. I didn't get the explanation from him, but I got the reading transmission from him, and then studied this text in the Shedra when I was studying in the monastery. And so I had to memorize the entire root text, 104 verses, and studied it in the Shedra.
And they do not alone.
But I was back, 20. I was 20 something years old back then. Now I've, it's 50 something, and now I'm teaching it. So.
I know that I read the Catson de Gas, dress that then I made the Yama the year Taru Chegum do and it is Zoya and the Hegi singing that is some tongue muscle and it turned and we should rather say Tigare, take it in a Hedge Johnson. They are borrowed in a jig, they say to send a watching Mahonje, Tunda de Tenichi, Leka Mumuchi, Matatin song. Thế này yang đã trên mà phát triển mong muốn ngài gì cái tăng chất thì yang chất chỉ hệ xong đó. Ta đi về giáo vụ chung số anh ta trên mà ta nói gì đấy, anh thuộc gì chứ? Thì có mà chế vào tên ngài rằng ta về giáo vụ chung.
And so, originally I planned to teach this, but then it wasn't really a big plan. I just thought I would teach it, but then some things came up and I had some things going on, so we had to cancel it. But then I got a lot of letters from people telling me they really wanted to receive this. And so then we ended up able to do it. So I really want to thank all of you who wrote letters and who encouraged me to teach it. It turned out really well. So thank you.
So
And so this what we learned here is something that, if you're really engaging in the Buddha Dharma, this is a structure which should be followed, like some instructions that are really quite important and necessary for us to take to heart.
Okay, tayang ege drama da she de ne chenaba zongo yore yang tik dwala ta nang la chira de che de yore o ka sere ta nang sang de so de nyam de ke che he go go re khala ye go yore ta na sam ya na ya sare.
Okay, so it's better if I leave it off here because I know it's getting late there and you all have things to do. You need to get to sleep, you need to spend time with your families, you need to eat dinner and so forth. So we'll leave it here.
Okay. Good night.
Good night. Thank you.